Go ahead and start. The Finance Committee meeting for August 3rd, 2018. Item 1.1, Deputy Jones, please.
Chair, recognition of progress, achievement, or improvements. Invite Cammie just to give you an update or a briefing on the construction. I'm sure that you're all aware, you can see the goings on in the parking lot. You know, for example, the arms, all that too. The hallway, the reception area, moving the reception area down to the doors that are fully accessible by the public. I'll take it away, Cammie.
So we are hoping to have those arms in the parking lot working and functioning in the middle of August, hopefully here in the next 2 weeks. We are not planning to charge at this point. We're going to monitor and see how that works. We are going to require that every visitor come in and validate their tokens when they receive them. We do have 2 validation stations, one right there at the reception desk and then one in our receiving dock. So as people make deliveries, they can have theirs validated there as well. We do have to work on signage, get that put up just so people are aware before we, start the arms. Your badges will be your access into the parking lot and exit, so you don't have to worry about taking a ticket when you come in. Our reception desk, our reception desk remodel, we're going to have carpet laid tomorrow. We felt like that would be the least disruptive in that main hallway while people are. We're going to do about 80% of the hallway and then have them take down that old reception desk and repaint there and finish their sanding, and then we'll place the carpet there and in that collaboration area. We did get some good news, and I had a meeting this week. They are going to fund our restroom upgrades this year. The amount that they got funded, we don't know if that will do all 3 of the restrooms in 1 year, but we are going to at least try to focus on 2 different floors. So, and then we're still working on the cameras and security system upgrade. That should be happening here in the next month or 2 as well. So lots of good stuff.
So if we have regular public who's coming to a meeting to visit, they'll need to still go through the parking validation now.
Yes, they'll just take a ticket, and when they walk in to sign in with the receptionist, she'll just validate their ticket right there.
Oh, that's easy, but it's just another step for the public to access us. So let's try and make that as smooth and as easy as possible and as generous, because I really want the public to feel welcome here.
Absolutely, and I think it'll be easier to make them feel welcome because they'll probably have a parking spot now, which will be nice.
We suspect that some of the parking spots out here are used by people who are not visiting here or working here.
In fact, it's funny, the people who have been installing the arms have mentioned to me on several occasions, people walking through saying, so they're finally doing it, huh? I don't have a place to park.
Ah,
so,
interesting.
yeah, we've got a lot of that. Any other questions? Thanks.
Subject to any questions from the chair.
Okay. Moving on, item 1.2, where I see a lot of people in the audience. We're really glad to have you all here. We are on limited time. I bet you have tons of really awesome things to tell us. We're going to give you each 14 minutes. There are 4 of us. Get 1 more minute, possibly, if we're feeling generous. And,
you don't have to take all 14 minutes.
And you might have so many good things to tell us you want to talk all the 14 minutes, but we'll probably retain more if you let us maybe ask a few questions, here and there. So let's get going and let's learn more about our regional service centers.
You have your timer?
I do actually, Chair Huntsman. Thank you for the reminder, though.
All right, well, I'll lead off. I'm Rick Robbins, Superintendent in Juab School District, and this is our Q's Director, Jason Strait. So we're thrilled to be here with you and share a little bit about what's happening in the service center. So I get the job to lead off, and you have the PowerPoint in front of you to give you a little bit of history that we all know. I wanted to mention one thing that's happened with me recently is I was in Los Angeles to a national legislative conference, and we were discussing personalized learning and competency education. And so we're in a panel, and it's a breakout with upwards of 200 legislators, and they're talking about how states accomplish this. And it just really gave me a sense of pride to, be able to share where Utah's at in this process when we're talking about connectivity and providing access to kids, and listening to other states ask questions about where do you even begin addressing issues in rural areas when it comes to providing service and access, and understanding what's been accomplished in history in Utah going back, clear back to 1966, and then with UETN coming on board in the early 90s, and really providing those services and reaching out to every part of the state. So it's an honor to be with you, and I'm excited to, along with our colleagues, to share a little bit about what's happening in the service center. So we'll kick off with that. One of the things you can see there that we're working on is really aligning the education elevated imperatives that the state board has set. I think we all agree that we really want to focus on maximizing our resources and trying to align those with the goals that the state has, so that it really does create access and equity for students and really meets their needs. One of the things that you can see there that we focused on with equity, and kind of the way that service centers are defining that, is meeting students' needs when they need it. And I think for rural schools, for us, as we know, we have challenges. Most of those are around geographical differences and being able to get what students need. So really, service centers are the engines that step in to do that. And whether it's providing professional development to teachers, or it's providing access to concurrent enrollment, or whatever types of resources that come along with that, you can see there kind of where that's at for JUAB. We've talked a lot about this in the past, about the backbone of our model really relies on our service center. We share those resources so that we really have the speed and the access that our teachers and our students in our community. So those are the three areas that we feel like we're most aligned to as far as a central focus. It's not limited to that, and we'll talk about some of the other processes that are in place. So this is a little bit about the CUES region and the demographics, and you'll hear from each service center, but you can see there the districts that are served in the CUES region, over 13,000 students. See another slide when it comes to an example of what students access. So here are some of the elements of equity that our students are able to access, and it's amazing to see this change over time. One of the things that we're all working on in the state right now is data security and tech and data privacy, and that's been a big focus in our area. And this is another example where our service centers really are able to leverage resources in rural areas to help with this. Most larger districts on the Wasatch Front have this infrastructure built in. We share these opportunities. So Jason can jump into any time, or if you have questions. So the quality learning piece, this is one place that we really focus on in providing opportunities for our teachers and our principals. Some of the very best professional development opportunities that I've been part of personally as a superintendent, as well as engaging our teachers, have been through the CUES Service Center. I don't think there's any better learning when rural teachers are able to get together and share and discuss the same challenges that they have, but also really focus on the outcomes that they see. So you can see a little bit there, the over 1,400 credits generated through different tech endorsement programs, including tech endorsement, STEM, reading, math. Those are just a few that have been offered through the service centers, which are just tremendous assets to us. And we also coordinate, you can see there with the other service centers. System values, so more along the coordination side of things. In rural schools, really the opportunity through technology and teachers leveraging tech tools is a really key element to our success. One thing that's interesting there, you think about the 13,000 students that are served in the region, over 31,000 checkouts. So that right there alone gives you an idea of how that impact takes place and students actually taking advantage that, maybe otherwise they wouldn't have that same opportunity. So just some tremendous things happening.
And I would just say that our vision at CUES is to create an economy of scale for the districts to be able to accomplish things that they themselves couldn't accomplish individually. An example of this would be our JAMF contract. That's an MDM for iOS devices and Apple products. And by joining together all the districts and combining the number of devices, we were able to save the districts over $90,000 annually on that contract if they were to go and get that contract individually, just because we're able to combine and they treat us as an educational entity to negotiate pricing. And so creating that economy of scale is very important for us, and part of our strategic vision that our superintendent set. We refer to it in our meetings, and our strategic vision guides us on where we're going to go and who we're going to, the PD we do, positions we hire, and the work that we do is all based off of a strategic plan that our board of directors, which is each superintendent in the school district, set for us. So if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask, we could answer at this time for the CUES region, and then we'll
I just want to express to our appreciation. Chairman Huntsman's been down to our meetings before, and just really appreciate all that you all do, and but this is just one small part of that you have to do at the state board. So we really appreciate everything that you
Mark? One thing that I didn't hear in your presentation that might benefit the board, the committee here, is that they work, this is my observation too, they work for those districts so that they meet, and the districts together, it's usually the superintendents, they say, this is what we need. Here's our new priority. And it's not a slow process. Your accountability is to whom?
the superintendents.
To the superintendents. So it's not like they're just something out there that you might access. They have a mission and purpose every day, and accountability when they're in their meetings of, okay, this is what we want you to do, and then when they meet again, it's like, did we get that done? How's that working? What do we need to do it better? And then so there's the governance system for them works very well with just my limited observation. But
yeah, we have a monthly board of directors meeting, which is each superintendent, and then we have a monthly technology directors meeting where we're directing and coordinating technology purchases, upgrades, firewall security, data privacy. Then we have professional development that meets together monthly, and then we're now starting to move into restorative practices, where we're looking at school psychology, some of those places to help with districts meet those needs. So we're starting. Our strategic vision is really generated by our superintendents and the district leadership to drive where we're going as a service center, so that we're always evolving to meet the needs that arise in districts.
My job is a tech teacher in a school, and when I look at these numbers, it's so exciting because it shows me that not only are you providing an excellent service, you're providing a spot where people feel comfortable coming, and you are so successful at reaching out to people. I mean, 31,000 overdrive checkouts is amazing. Having over 100 teachers certified in some kind of endorsement is incredible. It just seems like everything's working. I mean, you're working hard to save us money, but you're also reaching out to the community, and it's very paramount that having a great relationship with your districts is providing this opportunity for our students, because when a teacher gets an endorsement in anything, they improve their teaching in everything. So kudos, congratulations, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's nice to hear about the bright lights in our systems.
Well, you need to hear that too as a state board. It's a reflection on our state and this commitment that's long been there. So it's a team effort. So we appreciate that.
The question is the regional service center's mission limited by rule or statute? It seems like there's lots of economies of scale you can find, and so can you kind of grow it, whatever, partnership and collaboration you can find between districts?
Yeah, I think we're always looking for solutions. I mean, the challenges that rural schools have. In CUES, we've tried to centralize our core vision around tech, except, the needs of rural districts expand. And that's something that, as Mark mentioned in our meetings, we're always looking for creative solutions to those needs as they come. So that's a challenge because there are lots. And so whatever the region can do to come together to pool our resources to create solutions is what we want to do.
I hope you'll keep kind of pushing the envelope on that. I mean, especially as I go out of state, I see that a lot of school districts are outsourcing their school buses, outsourcing their school lunch services, janitorial services, maintenance services. So that, the fact you can collaborate and share those kind of services, either outsourcing or sharing within workers, that'd be great. I wish we could just give you more funding. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon, especially in the amount we need. So we have to be efficient, ruthlessly as efficient as the private sector, possibly even more ruthlessly efficient than the private sector, in order to get the resources we need to our teachers and our students. Carry on.
And then I would just add that not only do we coordinate with our board of directors, but there's 4 service centers. Those directors all work together to offer these services. So like one service center will offer the math endorsement and run it for all of the teachers in all of the regions. And so we're very closely coordinating and using the resources of each other to help teachers and professional development that way also.
I like economy to scale, but I disagree about outsourcing things. I think outsourcing does not create long-term jobs with building our communities, so I'm not on board with that. So that's his opinion. I don't know if everybody carries the same opinion. I like jobs that grow our economy and our schools and our communities and provide benefits and stable homes. So, thank you.
Good. Thanks.
Yep.
Big fan of outsourcing.
Thank you for allowing us some time on your agenda today. I'm Ben Dalton, Superintendent of the Kane School District, and this is Joby Wright, new Director for SCDC. We're here to talk a little bit about SCDC and the service center that represents our districts. SCDC is comprised of 6-member schools, or 6-member districts, which includes Beaver, Garfield, Iron, Kane, Millard, and Washington. Excuse me. And recently we have added 7 charters, and we currently have a Success Academy member who sits on our board, provides input to charters, and we also provide additional resources and training to charter schools.
Are you the first or only to add charter schools?
I don't know the answer to that.
No. Charters?
I think others may have charters in it as well.
That's excellent. I love we're all in this together approach.
We are. We're all about educating students. We have 7 FTEs currently in SCDC. We're the largest regional service center because we have Washington County and Iron County. So we have approximately 46,000 students and 2,300 teachers. We also have an e-books or overdrive system where there's approximately 56,000 checkouts and 3,700 videos. There's a little video there for you. We won't go through that, but if you would like to go through it, it highlights some of the overdrive. The service center is the portal to the outside world through the connectivity of the internet. And students in rural areas have the opportunity to take books from this virtual library, check them out, then the books are then returned back electronically. And they can also do books for our professional development, for our teachers, there's audio books, and students love to access these books because it's expanded our library, and our districts have all contributed to additional materials and resources for that library. It's one of the crowning gems, I think, in our SEDC region.
If you get a chance to watch that short video, it's just 2 minutes long, but it's our media specialist from SEDC talking about our Overdrive collection. One of the highlights of our Overdrive collection is that we've actually taken student-created books and added them to Overdrive so that the whole region can access books that were created by students within the region.
So exciting.
Published authors. Canvas, we have over 200 teachers who access Canvas and 7,000 students. SEDC provides the training for those teachers, and any problems we run into, SEDC is our main point of contact. We have numerous PDs and on-site visits from SEDC in all of the regions. We also use SEDC to host our FIS server for Kane and Garfield. They host Alio for us. They do all the updates for the program. Any issues that we have went together and partnered with those two districts to make sure that we have that FIS server available to both of those districts. Network and wireless support, they're always on site to help us with any of the real technical issues that we have. They have an expertise set that we don't have in our rural areas. And it's nice to be able to call on those people to come in and help us. UETN actually funds 2 positions for SEDC, and they are the engineers and the on-site trainers for our districts. Any questions on that slide? SEDC also is one of the only districts who receives an autism funding grant through the Humane Services. And this grant allows us to purchase a full-time autism specialist, and he provides services to all of the regions. He'll provide services to parents, to teachers, paraprofessionals, anyone who may need additional assistance with autism testing, or interventions. It's been very successful to have a person with that quality come into our districts and sit down with a paraeducator and say, this is the training that you need, successful in the classroom. Really appreciated SEDC reaching out for that. Districts also receive a Base Plus formula funding for autism that we take those funds into our district and provide services at the local level. BIAS is a training that was purchased for parents and students and teachers to help with autism or autism questions, and we make that available to all of our people in our service areas. Questions on the autism? Endorsements. Coordinate with other districts and other service centers to provide the endorsements. The main ones that SEDC works with is elementary math endorsement. We have about 15 teachers participating in that. We had 198 teachers participate in the STEM endorsement. And then we had the ET endorsement, and there were 57 participants last year. So that is also partnered with SUU and UVU to receive college credits for those endorsements. The last thing we have is we also host the Sterling Scholar in our area. About 199 students participated in that. Wonderful event to come together and highlight academic achievements of our students. Cooperative regional purchasing, as has been discussed, we all come together and when we can get a Washington County on board to purchase cameras or antivirus software or whatever we need, the leveraging power can just drive those prices down. It helps everyone. And we meet together every month and we talk about, this is what we need in our district. Can someone help us, or does someone have the tools to help our district be successful in this area? And it's basically like a PLC community for superintendents, but on a tech scale. And we talk about what's working in your district, how can we incorporate that in ours? And we found it to be very successful. And same thing with BSWAT. So that's when we bring together our district technology teams. That's a PLC for them. They talk about new implementations that they're bringing into their district, new programs, software, servers, and when those come in, how do they roll them out? And then we troubleshoot maybe as a beta project with one district, and then we roll it out to other districts. Very successful as a central landing place for all of those trainings. Talked about SUU's cooperative learning. We provide professional development for librarians in the schools, and we do a COHA training to keep track of the library circulation, and it's also a boot-up camp that's provided for librarians. They also do a secretary training for all of our secretaries in our schools. We schedule our IVCs, and we also have a transportation software that's hosted at SEDC, where we schedule out all of our buses, dispatch the drivers and buses, and that's kept track of at that level. We also use those reports to report to the State Office for Transportation. Great thing for us, and it streamlines that process. Last year was the first year that we started a district spelling bee, and 3 districts participated in that.
One of the big projects recently that the superintendents came to us and said we need help with student safety, particularly cameras. And so because we're a cooperative, we were able to purchase that software and those cameras for a lot less. And then we come out, help the districts install them, help with the software, help train the principals on how to use the software. So that's been a big key for us the last few months, last year.
I'm watching your lane change opportunities and your employment opportunities. Has this increased your retention rate and that you're growing your staff internally is incredible. So have you seen less turnover because teachers now see an opportunity for them to grow their financial opportunities and also have choices within their educational opportunities?
So that's a very good question. I can answer for the Kane District. Yes, we've seen less turnover because teachers have the ability to purchase these credits through continuing ed, which is much cheaper, much more cost effective, but they can also get the endorsements. And then when they come to us with the endorsements, they obviously need tools and resources, and so we're providing those out to those classrooms. Teachers feel more empowered, I would say, and have access to the tools and resources they need to be successful in the classroom.
As we talk about retention and growing our teachers, and this is awesome for that because now they don't have to leave to go have a different opportunity someplace else. So congratulations, this is fantastic.
We recently had 3 teachers who just completed the STEM endorsement for our district. They came in and sat down, they said, we have our STEM endorsement, now we need these things, can you help us? And we were able to do that.
Phenomenal, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So they finished 5 minutes early.
Bonus points for that.
A+.
Good morning. My name is Lance Hatch. I'm the superintendent at Carbon School District. Drew the short straw. And
and I'm DuPont's from News. I drew the short straw.
Yeah, there you go.
For Scott.
Yeah.
So.
I want to first of all excuse Scott Crane. He wasn't able to come today, and he's a very experienced administrator and serves very well the districts who participate in the Southeast Service Center. We are based in Price, but we serve 4 different school districts, probably the largest geographical area. And one of the things that I want to bring out is the 2 charter schools that are participating, members of our service center as well. One thing I want to highlight, a lot of our stuff is very similar to everyone else's, but Alpine School District has 79,000 students. And if they had an initiative today that they said, this is really important, we want to invest in this initiative, but we can only afford $1 per student from the WPU. We have almost $80,000 to work with to implement an initiative. In Carbon School District, we would have $3,000 change. Not enough to do a whole lot. So, however, when we combine forces with the other districts, we all of a sudden have some purchasing power, and I think you've seen that. One thing that's really interesting about our service center is the superintendents form a board very similar to what board you're on. We approve the budgets. We say if the people want a pay increase, that is the board who has to approve those kinds of things. And for many years, the chancellor of USU Eastern has been participating on our board. Chancellor at USU Eastern is basically the president of USU Eastern, but they can't call it president because USU has a different president. So very active member of the board. And only recently, on his suggestion, we changed him from being a voting member of the board to participating. But he's there at every single meeting, fully cooperating in everything that's going on with the service center, and we appreciate that. You want to go to the next slide? I'll just highlight a little story that I grew up in San Juan School District and had the opportunity to be the principal at Monticello Elementary, where I went to school, and brand new principal, struggling to implement certain things, and in walks this lady named Teresa Wilson. She walks into my office and sits down and says, she doesn't come in and say, I have some programs that I think you guys should be implementing. She sits down and says, tell me about what you're doing. What are you trying to accomplish? And then she went and gathered the resources, the technology that would support us in our goals. And it was a game changer for us. And that position is only possible through Southeast Service Center. On the next slide, see that we participate with a lot of activities in higher education. I would just highlight something that all of the service centers are working together on, and that's a way to train teachers who are receiving the APT license. So these are people who haven't any experience in teaching, yet we're hiring them to teach. So how do they gain that experience? In a big district, they have all kinds of professional development people. They develop their own courses and classes and everything. Well, we can't do that. We don't have the personnel. But together we do. And so with all of us working together, we have the classes, and now these teachers get high quality instruction on how do you teach. It's the best way to do that. And it's been really helpful. Our teachers have greatly benefited from that.
Good question. When the state board approached that alternative route to licensure, 2 years ago, it was many viewed as highly controversial. I was somewhat shocked we eventually passed it by a 15-0 vote. We thought it was overwhelmingly an idea whose time had come. It's now been out there 18 months, couple years. I know in urban school districts it's been kind of like, yeah, whatever. But in rural, what's been the response?
Well, from my perspective and those who I talk with, for example, Ron Nilsson down in San Juan, he's the same way. We would not survive without it. I don't know how we would hire teachers. We must have that option because the kind of people that we get aren't from the Wasatch Front coming out of the universities. They are homegrown people who have ties to our community, who want to be in our rural area. They understand it, they love it, they want to be there, but they don't have the credentials. So we would have many positions that would just go unfilled. I love it. I appreciate it. We love flexibility and having options.
Well, that's great because I think it's one of the finest accomplishments we've done on the state school board recently, and I hope we can find more things like that to do, things that are just overdue. So thank you for saying that.
You. On the next, you can see everything there, but I did want to stress that the 4 districts have been working, and the charter schools have been working together on a Talent Ready grant.
Monticello, by the way.
What's that? Yeah, probably.
So you have color.
Yeah.
Marge, actually, I think that's you
I
on the
know, I
front
was
row.
gonna say that.
I wish.
Your hair looks better then.
Thank you. We're working together to write a Talent Ready grant because we recognize the teacher shortage hits rural areas a little harder than it hits other areas. So we have the philosophy is let's catch them while they're young. let's train them while they're young. These kids who have ties to the community already, they live here. Many of them want to come back. They want to stay, but often the jobs aren't there. So we're working together for this academic pathway to teaching, and we're really excited. USU Eastern is heading that up, and we hope that we get funded to be able to start really targeting high school students with classes, get them excited, get them thinking, I want to teach, and transition smoothly as a cohort into USU Eastern's program, and as they are our. That's all I've got.
And then is Kathleen.
So I'm looking at the current broadband speeds of Utah, and I don't know who has, this is residential, but I have the other one. Are any of your schools experiencing broadband problems, and is there a way that we can assist with that? Because, okay, I think Duchesne
That would be a UETN, but they have projects right now going that are going to finally finish the last in.
Okay.
And then they have
San Juan.
And they're doing a
San Juan
project to get to
tough
those
too.
last schools. And they'll be fully fiber.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have gig within 2 years, I think, across the whole state, is what we've heard.
Awesome. I'm glad that that's
Amazing.
Our speeds are not consistent across the whole entire state, and that is a huge problem. So I'm glad that we have a plan in place for that.
And it's amazing that we're talking about speeds, because we were just talking earlier, there are some places in the United States where there's nothing.
Yep.
Zero connectivity at schools, and so this is great.
I think that our broadband capacity is the lifeline for you guys to be successful. So I want to make sure that if there's anything that we can do to facilitate that, I would love to help with it. Thank you. Two times.
Yeah, double whammy.
Duke has double duty.
My name's Dale Lamborn. I'm superintendent up in Rich County. Unfortunately, at the end of this slideshow, they showed Flaming Gorge instead of Bear Lake, but that's okay.
That's really just that when people don't have the right pictures, it really bugs me.
Yeah, it's just,
It really does. I've been like, where's that from? I'm like, I don't know.
no.
Strawberry Reservoir.
But I jokingly said that because of the uniqueness, I think, of the districts represented there, not only in terms of where we're at geographically, but where we're at in terms of size. Park City, Wasatch, certainly very different than Daggett and Rich, but we work together and it works out extremely well. Duke is our regional service center director, does an outstanding job of making sure that service center provides something meaningful for all of us. And as a group of superintendents, I think we work together extremely well, trying to meet the needs of everyone. Our charter schools, Littleman has been with us the longest. They're in Park City. The others have come on board since then. And again, that has added, I think, it's added a lot for all of us as we understand the unique needs of the charters, and we work to try and accomplish those needs. Nobody except Park City would have a winter sports school program, but that's something that's unique to Park City, and it's working out well, I think, as we try and address some of their unique needs. So I think, and it's already been touched on, so I don't need to go into it, but the critical need of connectivity and the things that are facilitated there. Again, our Alio servers housed there. Some of our other servers for Rich District are housed at our regional center, and that makes it much more cost-effective for someone, district as small as ours, to be able to pay back on some of that. The trainer is vital, both in terms of some pedagogical training as well as the back-end availability. We've had both. One trainer does the instructional training and the other one more of the back-end stuff. And again, we have a Lone Ranger in Rich County that tries to do it all, and the times he needs some help, this provides that opportunity. And they get together the monthly meeting to take care of that. Again, you can see the endorsement programs, which would be impossible for us to run on a district basis, but running it through the 4 service centers now, not just through the one, makes that cost effective. The technology is wonderful. My teachers, the closest, and we're not terribly far away from, we're an hour and a half away from Utah State. We also have Logan Canyon, which in the winter becomes pretty rough at times. They can leave their classroom at 4:30, log into the IVC, and then they have a great opportunity. That works extremely well. Our Sterling Scholar Program, done through our service center, makes a great difference for our kids and some scholarship opportunities.
I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but the way the endorsement program works for our coordination between the 4 centers, math is on Monday, ESL's on Tuesday, reading's on Wednesday. Is that right, Bob? And then APT's on Thursday. So we try and pick different days of the week. The classes are held one night a week, so it's easy for the teachers right at, after school around 4:30, so they can come in on their time. It's not too time consuming, but we complete the endorsements in about a 1.5-year time period, so they can the cost is by far the cheapest available as far as getting college credit for these courses. So it works out being a great deal for the rural teachers. And we have a lot of urban teachers. We have teachers from Alpine and Weber that participate when they can. So you'll notice we have 22 LEAs in the reading program, and that's from all across the state, top to bottom. So and as well as charters.
We are even having to start to put APT on them on Thursday.
Starting
So
to
many
double
that
book.
we're on top of each other.
Yeah. But UEN through the connectivity makes it all possible. Without the IVC system, this wouldn't work at all.
So can I ask a question about the Alio server? So when a teacher so I work in Granite, and we span a couple miles, not as many miles as you guys, but I can remotely go into a computer, 10 miles away. Is that what your network engineer can do? Can remotely go into their computers and work with them through the server?
Yes, so if you look at that.
Even though it's different districts and everything, that's really
yes,
cool.
and so our network engineer, so he had 163 on-site visits where he was actually hands-on in the districts, but 1,221 that were done virtually over the system.
That's what made me ask that question. That's fantastic.
Chair, how much time do we have? I just got a couple of questions.
9 minutes.
So for you, Duke, and the service centers, the last couple of years, on the board, we're getting ready for our legislative ask again, and it's been kind of tough. And you're, I call it the dog and pony show as you throw all of this together. I know you put things together for the legislature and making sure you're still getting funding. Some of it was at risk a couple of years ago. Well, I guess it's always at risk. And you're showing how you justify your existence with an ROI here. But moving forward into this next round, it would be nice to know if you have if you guys with your regional service centers, if there is any legislative ask to get those early and to us with really good support behind it. And we as Deputy Superintendent Jones here has come up with a way for us to package our legislative ask. So we'll probably want to package that in a similar format. And we're actually between now and our next board meeting, we're rolling our sleeves up, starting to get ready now. I'm not saying we're going to approve or the board's got to get behind it, but if you have a story to tell or if you have something or a betterment and you have your boards behind you and everything else, now's the time to start packaging what that might look like. No guarantees.
Right, we understand.
Start writing a letter to Santa.
Thank you. I understand how that works.
I can just add a couple of things. I know you're going to be wrapping this up, but thank you for what you do. Duchesne, for an example, that was up there, they can't function, in my opinion, without the service centers. And I can start listing a whole lot of those rural districts, and it's a way you basically glue yourselves together and fight in a common fight. And bringing those betterments, it's the only way it can happen. It's very efficient. Hopefully, you keep all of that up and keep really good stats on your accomplishments. So, thank you for what you guys do.
I would just close the Wasatch Back and Utah Rural Schools Conference coordination. Utah Rural Schools has traditionally been held in Cedar City. We're going to start rotating that between Cedar City, Price, and Richfield. Wasatch Back is relatively new. Wasatch School District kind of ran some things specific for teachers around technology for a while. It's expanded. Now our entire region is jumping on board. Duke's helping to coordinate that. So it's, again, a wonderful opportunity for teachers to get some good training. And then for Rich District, the online driver's education has been a wonderful thing. It's to get the class portion of that without taking a lot of extra time. It works really, really well. Take care of the driving portion. So a lot of the others, duplicity there. Flaming Gorge when it could have been Bear Lake.
No, we got Bear Lake.
No, I'm just kidding. Any questions?
I love receiving invitations in the mail to these things. I can't always go to them, but it does open my mind to all the great things that are happening and give me a different perspective. So if you can include us in things that you're doing, like I said, we can't always get there, but it's nice to know that it's happening and that there's opportunities that are available. I did come and visit you up in when you hosted the school board meeting. It's exciting. I got to meet all your board, so that was really fun. And sometimes I just don't hear about it. And that's kind of with the scholarship opportunities. To see that up there illustrates the point that our rural students don't feel like they can't be a part of these scholarship opportunities. And so that we have these opportunities for these kids, because that's what even the students last night mentioned, that no one had told them about it. So that even is growing better students and better opportunities for our students. So just great things.
So our final slide is last year about this time, the legislature, it was Jill and Ben came and wanted us to put together some performance measures that can be reported to the legislature annually. And so we put that into place in January. So it's really half a year's worth of data that we've collected for 3 out of 4 of the data points. But that's kind of how it broke out for January through June and what we'll bring to the legislature this year as far as what our goals were. Some of those may have to be adjusted. We're going to kind of look at it over a 3-year period to see. So for training hours, the actual hours spent training teachers in the schools, our annual goal is 3,200. So the half-year goal would have been 16, and we're about 14. So we're a little bit low training hours, but our participation hours, which are the number of hours multiplied by the number of teachers that are in trainings, was well above what our annual goal is, even though it's just for half a year. So had a lot of professional development opportunities where there have been multiple teachers in those trainings. Our technical support hours are also over the goal that we had for our half year. So that may have to be adjusted up a little bit, but that's where our tech folks are out supporting LEAs and their tech directors. And then our graduate level credit hours goal for a full year was 1,500. Actually doubled that and then some with the programs that we're using across the state. So anyway, like I said, we're going to try and look at that over a 3-year period and adjust those as needed, but that's what we here. So that's our final slide. Any additional questions?
No. Very informative and very impressive.
I want you to know we appreciate your support, all that you do for our kids. Appreciate you guys.
Maybe one question. Are Box Elder and Tooele part of a regional service center?
They aren't. They actually used to be part of News. News used to kind of wrap around the Wasatch Front and include Cache, Logan, Box Elder, and Tooele. But sometime way before I got there, they decided to kind of opt out. But Tooele participates in our Sterling Scholar competition, and Logan has participated with us recently on an RFP to purchase online curriculum. So we've been trying to include them whenever we can in things that we're doing. I mentioned, this RFP that we just got done doing with online curriculum. Davis District found out that our region and the Q's region was looking at doing another RFP because we're at the end of our 5-year contract. And so they asked if they could join with us and actually ran with the RFP. And so we ended up having about 26 of 27 districts, LEAs across the state participate, and ended up saving them a minimum of 100,000 easy on the 3 products that we ended up settling on. And so it's been a great cooperative effort and brought in some other districts to join with us outside of our normal service areas. So it's really.
And I think that's important to note. Sometimes things are presented, it sounds like it's the urban districts and the rural districts and we're a separate being. I'm one of the grandpas in terms of being on superintendent a long time. The cooperation between superintendents, whether it's Davis or Alpine or Rich, has just been outstanding, and that continues to be the case. Hopefully it will continue to be that. In fact, I think there are becoming more things that we can help each other with. Davis been a big part of this, the last thing, but when we did Alio a few years ago, Alpine chaired that, ran it, saved us. Basically, if Rob and his group hadn't have been as involved as they were, we'd have been in big trouble. So it is, the graphic there makes it look like it's different, but it's all of us working together.
PLCs among the superintendents, huh?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, we use each other a lot.
Yeah. Awesome.
I just think it's great that you haven't used news, cues, you didn't use Sue's.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry. Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
So you cover this part of the state. I often hear from Tooele, we wish that we could be in a regional service center. And so there are rural areas out in Box Elder and Tooele and some of these other areas. What do they do? Have another regional service center, or did they used to have one and now they don't?
I mentioned News used to actually wrap all the way around the Wasatch Front, and we've invited them to participate. Logan was looking at it. Scott, we talk to Superintendent Rogers all the time, and like I mentioned earlier, their kids and their smaller schools participate in our region's Sterling Scholar competition, so they're not competing with the Wasatch Front kids. And we try and include them whenever and wherever we can. Their tech director is on our tech director's distribution list, so he gets all the emails and knows of all the things that we're working on and is invited to participate. So try and include them as much as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for driving here.
Very much, yeah. Really appreciate that.
Who traveled the farthest?
Kane,
Superintendent Dalton.
yeah,
Ben did.
Oh, who traveled the farthest? Thank you so much for taking some time, 5 hours.
It's a great group here.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Are a great group. I just
So, Chair, so pursuant to R 277-706, staff recommends that the Finance Committee make a motion that the board approve equal distribution of the current $2 million line item of so.
Okay.
I'd move that we divide the $2 million by 4 for the service center.
Second. Oh, we don't have to second.
Okay, any discussion to the motion? Deputy Jones, my only question is do they all feel good about that? Is that like a reasonable?
R277706 is pretty clear that USBE shall distribute funds if provided by the legislature, which they are provided, in equal amounts to eligible regional service centers. Based on what they've done here today. They present it to you, and then in the backups is all of the requirements, like their audit, everything like that. So that's additional information for you. The 277706 says in equal.
And can we put this on the consent calendar?
The next year?
No, does it have to go to the full board for approval next month?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I know we discussed that. So if the committee makes all all members of the committee are in all agreement, yes, we could do that.
It goes consent.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, I think we're ready for a vote then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Okay, on to the consent calendar in the September board meeting for that item for regional service centers. Now, board, I think we're going to invite Leon up for items 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. And after he finishes these three things, I think we're going to try and do this in about half an hour, Leon, if that's at all possible.
We're going to do it in 15 minutes.
Woo-hoo, let's go.
Oh my, he's way too efficient. No wonder King is doing so well. And then we'll go for like a 10-minute break, and then we'll do the remainder. Just a little bit of background. We've been talking about this for a few months. The state school board, has an authority general supervision of the public education system. But really, we are a crossroads, an intersection. All the federal money, all the state money, a lot of stuff comes through us and goes down. And we want to do it as well as possible. We want to make your job as efficient as possible. I know this sounds a little bit weird, but a lot of people, when they get into public education as an elected office, they have other issues. I was really into the whole efficiency thing. I saw an RDA pass when the state school board voted for it against the wishes of Alpine School District. That made me so mad, I said, I'm running for the state school board. And I just think there's so many good things that can happen. I love what we heard about the regional service centers. So Leon is representing not Canyon School District, he is representing USBE, which I think is a pretty cool acronym. I enjoy saying USBE. But Utah Association of School Business Officers.
Just kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Is it officials or officers?
Officials.
Officials. And so their job is to get the best bang for the buck they possibly can for our school districts. And so Leon is going to talk to us about three different things in ways where we could potentially do that. These are things I've kind of asked that the state school board can do unilaterally without going to the legislature, ways that we can potentially improve. And this is very much a dialogue. I mean, maybe we can do some of these things, maybe we can't. Maybe we'll just tell staff to do it. Maybe we'll need to take this to the full board. Maybe we'll make these an agenda item, for next month. But would probably, if it's possible, I won't be here, but invite you as both back once a year so we can have an ongoing dialogue on this. Okay, enough on that. Item 1.3, Leon, please.
Yes, thank you. I just want to appreciate Chair Wright reaching out to the USBE leadership. As you mentioned, my name is Leon Wilcox. I'm the Vice President of USBE this year, and so he has invited us out to bring some concerns. And we hope this invitation continues, even a couple times a year. We would appreciate coming and addressing the Finance Committee if we could. I also want to recognize the Canyon School District, our great representative, Board Member Reeby. She is always at our board meetings, always at our events. She's always taking our input and seeking our input too. And so we really appreciate all she does.
Clearly she doesn't have a life.
I really don't.
I wonder, she's everywhere. And
yeah.
It's not true. She goes
It's a
to her
genetic
kids'
disorder.
lacrosse
I really
games.
like meetings.
I also want to recognize Deputy Jones and his fine staff and all they do to support business administrators throughout the district. I hate to single out people, it's not right, but there's two that I really feel they need to be singled out, and that's Natalie Grange and Jamie in the back. Jamie.
You just walked out.
Jamie, I acknowledge her, and she will leave.
Just went for other duties as assigned.
Other than duties as assigned.
Those are the scariest ones.
They have to try and keep 41 business administrators happy, and some 120 charter finance directors happy, and that's an impossible task. But they do a very good job. They're always responsive to our calls and our needs. Natalie and I go back some
100 years, yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to add the years, but we started together in the state auditor's office years ago. And we really appreciate Jamie. I have to say about Jamie, she sends out this allotment memo. It's a couple hundred pages long every month. And then it goes through our email filter to me, and it says it comes across as allotment memo, but then it also says may contain offensive language. So I print out my 2 pages. There's nothing offensive there, but I know she's embedding some language in somebody else's allotment. Jamie is not only one of the most confident people I know, but also one of the nicest. So I can't imagine that her doing that. But I just that always cracks me up every month. But, we'll go through these 1, 3, 4, and 5, and I'll just hit them all. And then if the committee wants, we can discuss them further. But these are items that we've reached out to business administrators statewide and got their feedback on some of these things. First one would be internal audit. As a former auditor, I spent 6 years at the state auditor's office, so I know the importance of audits. You know, it's I remember the first day on the job, the state auditor brought us in our little training room and said, hey, the first thing we do is we have all these controls, and the number one thing they do is keep honest people honest. And so that's really the purpose of audit. But sometimes there can be inefficiencies in audits. Every school district is subject to an external auditor or external audit. And so sometimes these audits, and then the USBE will have their staff come in, and sometimes there's overlap in those. So sometimes your external audit will audit one thing, and then USBE will come back in and audit the same thing over again. And that just seems like a redundancy of efforts there. It seems like there could be a better coordination involved there. I've also heard some districts that they seem to be repeatedly audited. One reached out to me recently, said they received 6 USBE audits this past year. That just seems a lot of time on the staff's part of this district. And another district reached out and said, you know, we just received this big audit on a grant that's $12,000, and it just doesn't seem like that's an efficient use of resources as well. And also, part of this one who reached out on the grant said they had to provide all this information in July, and at school districts, many people have an 11-month contract and have July off. So that makes it also very difficult for the program directors there. So everybody understands the importance of audits. We just hope that be maybe more communication, more structured with that as they move forward.
Kathleen?
Is there an appeal process where we can say, like, a district can come and say, just audited this, or is there a way that we can give them a safety valve for having too many audits? Or
one of the things too is just to orient the finance committee members is we provided some backup of the presentation that Internal Audit Director Davis gave to
I was looking at those now.
Right, and so it does go along that line too, that there's some potential misunderstandings between audits and compliance. Good term. But we understand that there could be some redundancy or duplicity as he's presented today. We fully acknowledge that too, I think. So there is a process by which, by way of either the initial engagement meeting or something, that the district could talk to our internal audit staff and say, hey, you know, we've already gone through a compliance type review. Could we use some of that information and provide it to you? So
that would be very helpful.
So, but I do not mean to speak for Internal Audit Director Debbie, you know. But I do believe if I learned from what she taught me, that was one thing that we so.
And I mean, can we publicize that mechanism or educate because if they feel that and they have legitimate, and I'm reading the difference between compliance and audit, and so.
Debbie?
Okay, so Debbie Davis, Director of Internal Audit, and I think this is a great conversation. And the study session back in June was intended to address this because we know it's been a concern. We definitely want to be more efficient and effective and improve. So there definitely is a difference between internal audit and the compliance, or we call it monitoring, that takes place. And that's outlined in the materials that I provided at the study session that are attached to this agenda item. As you know, internal audits, as we discussed yesterday, all of those are approved by the board. Internal audit has not gone out and audited an LEA 6 times, right? I don't have the staff for that. It's not happening. So that is the compliance or the monitoring function. The monitoring function, it is a requirement. There's a federal requirement for it, and there's actually a board rule that calls for a monitoring program from the superintendency for each program that is administered. And as you know, between our federal and state programs, we have over 100 programs. Now, even though that monitoring has to happen, can we do it more efficiently and effectively? Absolutely. And with the grants management software and system that's coming online, that's going to help a lot. So I think there are these two separate functions, internal audit and monitoring or compliance, that happen. There are requirements for both, and there's a place for both as we're trying and seeking excellence in our public education system. But can we do a little bit better? Absolutely. There's always room for improvement.
One other thing that I wanted to bring up that Debbie kind of alluded to is one of the barriers or issues that we've been facing for the past few years is that we don't have standardized processes. We don't have standardized systems where everything kind of gels together. With the implementation of the grants management system, we'll have the ability to track and provide and the LEAs will also have more transparency on their side as to what grants. In doing so, we'll have the ability as an agency to put together an agency-wide risk management or agency-wide risk assessment process. Our staff are currently working with programmatic staff in financial operations and the programmatic staff to work through what their monitoring processes are right now, because each program does their own thing. We have to standardize those. I would anticipate within the next year the board will be seeing policies that we'll be asking you to adopt for grants management. It may take another year to kind of get some of these things flowing through. But we are working towards that state of being where we don't have people asking for 100% documentation for things, where we can risk-based monitor rather than monitor. One of the root cause things that we've noticed in the past year, and I think one great appreciation that I have, and I wanted to make sure that this gets back to the business administrators, I think for the first time ever, we actually put in a cutoff period for fiscal year end. And the first year that we did something, it's always difficult, right? But we were able to clear $55 million worth of grant payments in the last month of June, or the last 2 weeks of June and July. Usually our payments in that period are about $10 million, and we're booking a $90 million accrual in the financial statements. Our accrual practices have to change because of this cutoff period, but what it enables us to do is to have more payments to monitor. Some LEAs don't request reimbursement for their grants until the month before the grant ends, and so our monitors don't have anything to monitor until those reimbursement requests come in. And those cycles vary depending upon size of LEA and dollar amount. It's interesting as we've kind of dug through the data and looked through the current practices, all the different ways that we have to improve and the efficiencies that we'll be able to gain. They're not going to happen tomorrow. Obviously, we have to put policies in place and practices in place. And turning something this big around takes a little time. But we're actually to the point where we can have these conversations, which we haven't been in the past few years. So we just, understand and absolutely hear what the business administrators are saying. I see it on my end and receive the phone calls and understand the concerns. And we're completely willing and open to have our policies be reviewed and have some feedback from our business administrators prior to enacting them. But we want to get to the same place that you want to get, where we're more efficient. We're using the work that's being done by your external auditors instead of duplicating. One other item that I think is worth mentioning is we're in concert. We're working with the state auditor's office to add another item to the legal compliance guide for our business administrators. And I know we've kind of broached this topic with them, where their external auditors would do the compliance work on payroll testing. So instead of every single one of our programs testing payroll, we could have the external auditors do it, and then our staff would only have to react to findings or concerns. And I think since payroll is 80 to 90% of most of the expenditures made by our federal programs, that will significantly mitigate the monitoring that's required on our end. So again, that's a work in process with the auditor's office and exactly how we can make that happen, what kind of impact that'll have on the legal compliance audits and the cost to our LEAs. But everyone that we've talked through so far has felt like that would be a good shift to harness more of the external audit work and shift it out of our house.
Debbie, it seems like with audits, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe this is too juvenile of a question, but the audits happen either randomly, or they're required to be done, or suspicious activity leads you to do an audit. Is that correct? That kind of falls within one of those three categories typically, or is there a fourth or two?
I'd say across the spectrum of audits that are done, whether it's by us or the feds or the state auditor's office, that captures pretty much the reasons for doing an audit. I would say here for us specifically, we try and make them risk-based. So there's a risk identification process. We take that to the audit committee, and again, that discussion of where does this fit on the priority list? Do we care about it based on what's in our strategic plan? We try and have those conversations, receive input from the superintendency, because there might be things we don't understand or know, so they help with that prioritization process, and then that's what comes to the board. And the audit is essentially just, let's help assess this risk so we know how big, how small, what's going on, and then it provides information for you as decision makers to either mitigate the risk or treat it or take whatever action is deemed necessary, if action is deemed necessary. So it's really just helping in that risk assessment process. But again, that's specific to how internal audit proceeds with audits here.
So this is not just a random formula. There's an intelligent, it goes to the audit committee. Mm-hmm. You guys think it through, so it's not just a random roll of the dice. And is there ever sometimes where it comes up and someone in the audit committee or someone else says, you know, this audit just doesn't make sense from a cost-benefit perspective, or this is just too much? Does that ever happen, or is it just kind of formulaic and you always go forward? Mark?
Well, it's about prioritize. A lot of risk is assessed. And so it's what's on the front, what's moving to the top. I'm talking about Debbie's world. And then we have the operations world of monitoring compliance, which is a different world. Debbie does not have any control, or the audit committee, on that world. So every audit that comes out of Debbie's world comes before the board. The board's aware. The BAs, an audit's an audit, and they, as they are experiencing all that pressure to conform to the monitoring, it all gets lumped into one bucket of audit.
Can I ask a question?
Linda.
Of the gentleman from. So, is the problem that it takes a lot of staff time? That's the main issue.
Yeah, it's staff time. You know, there's never really a downtime in a school district. You know, even the summer's actually the busiest for the finance departments. And there's just never time to pull documentation. You pull it for one audit, put it back, then somebody else comes and you got to pull it again. So there's staff time in preparation. You know, it could be a few hours, it could be several hours. And then you always have other things on your day-to-day operations to run your school district. So that's part of the problem. Because sometimes the problem is, you know, we get these requests that say, hey, we need this stuff. It comes in on Monday and we need it by Thursday. And I'm not saying USBE, but that also adds pressure too.
And it's coming from all different departments, right? So it's
special
you have
the compliance. You know, we understand the difference between audits and compliance. But yeah, it comes from all programs here, and so. And sometimes, you know, it holds up our reimbursements, and that was kind of my number 2, is it holds up our cash flow if stuff back to you in a certain time. So that's
I just want to come back to the audit. It's a challenge, and I talk a lot with the local boards, and that it's not the BA's. The BA's, one of the BA's challenges, especially in the rural district, is they don't have enough people. And so where do these people come from, and how are they hired? Well, the local boards have to go within their budget and prioritize staff and that. And my pushback, as I hear from the board members on the local board members on the challenges of audit, and I said, well, where do you get your money? is it federal? Is it state? And do you print your own? Do you get it from your own county? How do you get your? Well, there's a compliance side of that. So it's not your BA's fault that all of these reviews are taking place. Now, there's occasionally Debbie steps in with that audit function and timing and everything, strapped resources, but all this compliance requires a certain amount of maintenance and manpower and staff, and it's always been there. And if your BA's can't handle it, then find out why and put additional staff on. But of course, that's easier said than done to take care of that compliance side. And so as I've been hearing the complaints, when we're talking about trying to bring proposed betterments, the monitoring isn't going to end or be minimized because we're doing the minimum now. We could look for some efficiencies on all of that with an end-to-end system, but there's a lot of pushback from the districts, or should I say the LEAs, in doing that to come up with those efficiencies, or to come up with that efficient system that will minimize manpower, because that's kind of a huge thing. We talked about it a lot, but before we move off of the whole audit thing, I just wanted to get the BA's perspective to see if I'm wrong on the manpower and wrong on the fact that we're also in the compliance business and you're in the compliance business too, that these funds are being spent the way they're supposed to be. And are you lacking of the manpower, or?
Some districts are. Some districts are lacking. I think in Canyons we're okay, staff-wise, to handle these requests. And we understand compliance. We understand that every dollar we get is taxpayer dollars, whether it's local, property tax, state, WPU funds, federal funds, of course. We understand that, and we understand the compliance issue side. But we also would hope that there can be a better system. I think that, to make sure to ensure that compliance. I think the grants management could be that right step, and that's part of my next one on the reimbursements. But is there some way, a standard that can be set on what needs compliance and other issues like that can be rolled out statewide that all districts know? I do like the idea of possibly having our external auditors look at payroll. It is 90% of our federal funds, pretty much our state money is people. And so if you could have that go through and then not put out these large general ledger spreadsheets that we have to send up to some department here to get our reimbursements, I think that would be a big. So I just think there's something standard-wide that we could work on.
We need to wrap this up, Kathleen, and then I'm going to wrap it up here.
Okay. I'm looking at page 3 of our risks, audits, and corrective action. And on page 3, it says that USBE has filed 14 of the 43 complaints. Is that something that we can maybe control on our end? If the USBE is making these complaints, that's almost creating more of a problem. So
what's wrong with us filing complaints?
Well, it isn't, but if we're talking about maybe trying to limit the amount of audits, maybe we could, I don't know. I mean, we're like one of the highest numbers of complaints out there.
We're talking about not every complaint turns into an audit, so help me understand what audits that we've done that's excessive. I understand that there's that part of it, but not all of those turn into it.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that just a little bit? And this is so this presentation was about a year ago when I went to USBE and presented. So those were the numbers at the time. Obviously, we have hotline complaints coming in, and it shows the protocol there that we go through a process, and we want to make sure we're treating those consistently and accurately. So we might go through, so just because a complaint is filed, it could be illegitimate. It could just be a general information referral. It could be referred externally back to an LEA. We might look at it. We could take it, as Chair Huntsman said, to the audit committee to propose an audit. I would say the majority do not become an audit just because we don't have the manpower, but those that potentially could be an audit, that comes to the board and you'd approve that. So I think it's a good system for people to be able to come and ask a question or say, hey, I have a concern about this, but then that vetting process to make sure, is this legitimate? Who's the best individual or entity to look at this? Is it us? Does it need an audit? Or can it go to an LEA? Can it just be referred to the superintendency? Or we send a lot of bullying ones up to SAS or licensing, or to UPAC. So they really get spread out, but I think the hotline is a good tool. It's good for people to be able to come and bring a concern. But that makes all the more critical our process for vetting that, and then how do we handle that, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, still, it's going to take some time for us to vet all of our complaints, so just a thought.
I have maybe two thoughts here from what you've said, Leon, and I'm interested in staff thinks these are too much. I think on any grant less than $100,000, there should just be clear standards for compliance. And if you meet those standards for compliance, there's no audit. That's it. It's not cost effective for us to be auditing, a $12,000 grant. Maybe there's some federal requirements, I don't know. Maybe even, the state puts, onerous requirements, but make very clear standards. You do these, you're in a safe harbor, there's no audit. Or if that's the string attached to it, we even say, federal government and others still require this kind of potential audit if these things go wrong. But just make it very clear. Because I think when you guys take a grant, you want to know, is it going to be, what are we getting ourselves into? Because it just seems, and I can't believe that you guys don't have better things to do than audit a $12,000 grant to death, unless there's serious suspicion of fraud or theft.
I would say you're exactly right, and we don't want to be auditing the $12,000 grant.
Yeah.
And that, to Assistant Superintendent Grange's point, the direction of the industry and where we're supposed to be, the standards are that we do risk-based. And so it should be, is it just $12,000? Maybe that's immaterial. So based on risk, we decide, how do we monitor because we're supposed to? Is that just, I looked at your reimbursement request, you're in compliance, that's enough? Or is it, I'll just give you a phone call, or hey, send me this? Or if it's really risky, to your point, there's fraud or something, we need to come out and we need to look at things. But that's what needs to happen, and that's what we're trying to build into the system. We want to get to that point because it's a lot more effective to monitor and audit both if they're based on risk.
Do we need direction from the board? How can we get it so that, on grants below $100,000, the clear standard?
If we could take this back to my business administrators and talk about that, I like that proposal. We always want to go well fishing instead of minnow fishing, go after the big things. And so I like that proposal. I would want to take that back and vet it with the BAs.
Why don't you do that and still talk to our staff and then bring us something as soon as it's ripe? There could be 50% turnover on this board. 3 of these 5 board members.
So you may want to just
2
ignore
won't
it.
be here. 1
Let's just do it.
Could not be here if the voters of her district think she's worthy of a promotion or demotion. We haven't decided.
Status quo, I would consider it.
So anyway, the sooner the better. We'd love to get this wrapped up. Natalie?
The thing I wanted to point out is we're already engaged in this process. So we're already working on putting together policies and practices to identify and clearly outline what those risk assessment processes would be and what the monitoring requirements would be. I think that putting a hard and fast threshold like that complicates the issue, because if you have a high-risk school, we might have to get documentation for a $12,000 grant. Somebody who's low risk, we don't have to. And that's where the risk assessment requirements that are required by the federal government, and to some degree also state auditing standards, need to be implemented and disseminated uniformly in this building. So we're already engaged in that process, and as we identify those practices or recommendations or potential policies, we would bring those before the business administrators and get their things and feedback and opinions. But putting a hard and fast cutoff in there would really impede our ability to comply, in my opinion, with some of our federal regulations. And so I would caution us not to put a dollar threshold and just, we do have options, the board has options, we have the ability to put different practices in place for different risk areas, but we have to identify those and have a standardized procedure first.
Internal bond rating.
Maybe, Natalie. I think it almost liberates you. I mean, yeah, there could be some low-level fraud. I don't know if it's worth chasing some level down there below 100,000. Maybe we even drink at 50,000. I don't know.
If it's a small school, it's a high percentage of their money. If they have like 5 or 6 of them, it starts to add up. So percentage-wise.
Okay, well, we'll have this discussion. Bring back something. And Deputy Jones?
Just a quick point. Natalie and I have discussed this, and it's under my direction that we should get the system in place as well and build around the system too. That's why it may be perceived that we've been slow or on too, but EGMS, I mean, that was a tactical call on my to do this so that we could share with the system and then, you know, build policies and procedures around that. I really do think the system will make it in the end. I apologize that it's been slower than thought, but that we guys completed a major recently. So I'd ask that we still continue to discuss it, but that we tailor it towards the risk assessment first, because that's really what Edgar and everybody, it's about risk. Determine that too. I'm not against a threshold or anything like that. It's just the risk part. And then we feel that the system will actually help us do that better. It's just my 2 cents worth, if I may.
Yeah, but the risk on a $5,000 grant, I don't know. And then the second thing is, it was alarming, you have limited staff, you get a call on Tuesday saying we have to have something by Friday. We have so many things, in doing that. What if we say, unless there's severe suspicion of fraud, and $50,000 or more, they get 30 days. Something. Just seems kind of bullying to call them up and say they have to have something in 3 or 4, unless it's clearly established. Debbie?
We've had this discussion in audit committee a little bit, and there's been a request to, if we could possibly put the audit calendar and a monitoring calendar out so that and everyone would know, hey, this is the intent, this is the plan, this is when you can expect people coming. Audit, hopefully we're closing in on that. Monitoring is a much bigger lift, and so I think there's more that has to be developed with the system and standardization before we can actually put out a calendar like that. But that's one option that has been discussed is let's put it out there so that people know, and maybe you'd know months in advance, which would be fantastic, so that there is adequate time. I would say generally once an audit has been started, kind of a 14-day window is about what's usual in getting information back. Based on my experience, I think that's what our legislative auditors and state auditors hold us to, although we have also gotten hey, we need this tomorrow or yesterday. So we definitely understand the feeling.
Yeah, I think part of the feeling, if I could maybe wrap it up, is sometimes it's not necessarily with the audit, but it's also with the other departments. We need this, the monitoring department calls up, got to close this out, you got to give this to us by 2 days from now, and that could be difficult. So if there could be a state board standard throughout all departments, I think that would be very.
Okay, I'll talk, maybe we'll do that, like a 14-day standard turnaround. I think that just puts a level of discipline on us. That's fair.
We need to plan, we need to.
Yeah. Like, for example, I don't put my iPhone by my bed after 9 o'clock at night. And I've actually deleted all social media from my phone because I can't handle it. I think something like that, the 14-day standard, is also good. It just puts a level of discipline on us. So we don't go there where we shouldn't. Hey, this is great. We're having too much fun. Let's go to item 1.4. Leon.
Yeah, all these items somewhat mesh together, if you will. But on this one falls right in line there about reimbursement requests. Again, it kind of goes back to the example, hey, we at Canyons, we get $5.5 million in IDEA money annually. We send out a request for $500,000 or $1 million a couple times a year, the money just flows right back. Some of these smaller grants, we got to send, for, again, the $5,000, the $20,000, we got to send in our whole GL and all kinds of invoices and payroll records to get the $20,000. It's always worth it. We're going to do it. But could there be a better way, again, maybe with the grants management, of working that out? Also, Also along this lines, some grants have a due date, an ending date of June 30th. Then at the same time, they want the reimbursement done June 30th. There needs to be a window there for all these. I don't want to get into the technical accounting terms of payroll accruals, but there does take some time to close out books. So ideally, there really needs to be about a 30-day window from, say, June 30th when the grant ends to 30 days till you need your reimbursement request into a department here at the USBE. It just can't be, okay, it ends on the 30th, we need it by July 1st. That's just not a practical solution. So maybe with the grants management, that's a comment we've heard from a few BAs. And also, we've also heard that some departments have said, the grant award ends on June 30th, but they've also said, hey, we actually need your stuff before June 30th. And you really can't do that. It ends on June 30th. It needs to stay that way. That's all I had on that.
Go to Kathleen and then Spencer.
So I was a part of an after-school grant, which was not a huge amount of money, but the grant involved so many steps that we were left wondering, did we even make any money on this? So, we had to retrain all of our teachers had to get re-fingerprinted, and is there a way that we can be the gatekeeper for creating less hoops for our districts to jump through with the grant? We are the grants management, but at some point we say, you're really asking a lot from an LEA to have an after-school program. You're really asking an LEA a lot to have school lunch in the classroom. So, we're up at 30,000 feet, but I'm down at 3 feet off the ground. And I'm like, wow, this took a lot of time and effort. And, when we as a school have to do that, we multiply that by 10, and then the person that's getting the grant has to collate all that information and send it out. So I understand accountability, but sometimes I think we've gone a little too far in that direction for accountability and, doing certain steps to get the money. So I don't know if that's something that's in our wheelhouse, but I'd like to see maybe some of those requirements being.
So one thing that this is sort of anecdotal information, but one thing that I've noticed as we have been working with each of our programs to put their grant applications in the system. In previous years and even this current year, those applications are drafted by specialists who may or may not have knowledge about what's going on in the rest of the building. And as we're bringing all those things together into one system, we're starting to see duplicative efforts. I know the business administrator saw a big change in the assurances document this year. We actually went across all the documents we could find and consolidated them into one place. That won't happen again, but we were finding that numerous assurances that were asking the exact same thing were being sent by every grant we have in this building. So again, as we bring stuff into a standardized system, because we're seeing everything, or there's a group of people who are now seeing everything, we have the ability to provide feedback to the sections and say, hey, maybe you should check the background checks of these individuals. They likely already have them. Or, you don't have to sign this assurances document anymore because it's on the standard assurances. And that's one of the reasons why the implementation takes a little bit longer. It's not just simple as just bringing a document in and putting it in the system, as we're trying to cut down on some of that duplication of effort and consolidate the information across the system. The great thing in the future, the assurances document will apply to every grant in this building, instead of every grant manager and program manager or district having to sign it. So next year, when it's in the system, that will map back to every grant. And any auditor that asks questions, whether it's state, federal, or whoever, will be able to drill back to one standardized document that the business administrator and the superintendent only had to fill out once. And so I think, again, I know it takes a lot of time to implement, but a year from now, I think we'll see a significant amount of efficiency both on our side and efficiencies yielded at the LEAs for not having to make 50 phone calls trying to track down a $12,000 grant. Everything that they'll need will be in one place, and they'll be able to see it and follow it through and know who to contact. They'll be able to send notifications through the system. So we, as the Board of Education, can follow up on inactivity, or if there are concerns or issues with reimbursement items, then the business administrators and business folks will be able to provide us that feedback in a more timely manner. Right now we get things kind of anecdotally, but if a grant pops up and Leon says, why do I have to send you every payroll expenditure for $498? I can actually look in the system and go, yeah, why do you Or we can forward that along to the program and have them reevaluate their risk assessment process and how it complies with the standardized practice that we're putting together.
So follow up, please. That's like a smaller grant, but then we have a really big grant like our digital teaching and learning that districts applied for. And that was extensive. I mean, that was like books this big. I mean, so I think that it runs the gamut that, you know, when we ask for all this information, we realize, I mean, it is good for our compliance and accountability, but we're in, you know, like schools are in the job of teaching kids and doing what's best for our kids. And sometimes if we're spending all of our time being accountable, we're not really focusing on the real reason we're all there. So that's, I bring this up not to say that we're doing it poorly, but we can do it better. We can be more focused on teaching our kids and spending time doing that.
Spencer?
I am sorry I did not get your name, but USBE is a fun word to say.
Leon.
Like from
Leon's equally as fun.
Elf. Says Leon.
Leon Wilcox.
Yeah.
He's not as fun as USBE, but
Or Spencer Stokes.
His last name. His last name's not
USBE. So I would really, this is a, so I think what Scott and Natalie are doing in trying to put a system in place is phenomenal. But I think we tend to, because the grant is coming to us, we feel like we've got to be in charge of making sure that everything is done correctly. But we are passing that down to business administrators who also want to make sure everything is done correctly. And then it's probably passing to a principal and then to teachers. But there's another step in this process, which are these specialists here, who I think, and I'm not, this is a broad statement, and everybody already knows I'm an a-hole, so I can just continue to say this.
But you don't have a cool last name like USBE.
USBE, I need to come up with one. I think there is a cool name that sounds kind of like USBE that I think people would give me. But I'm with Kathleen. I think we put so much red tape in the process of passing money through us, which it's part of this thing that I keep saying. Are we really needed here? I mean, couldn't it just go directly to the business administrators and then we could have an agreement with them? You got to have all your ducks in a row, and we're coming back to you when people come to us and ask for the paperwork. Why do we have this redundancy of people who want to make sure it's all right? And then we've got these specialists that are that are in these programs like the reading and digital teaching and learning that are also torturing our teachers. So we've got just a whole mess of people torturing the people. You didn't. Torturing, but I have a wife that teaches, torturing the people on the bottom line.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, I signed on to teach first graders. I didn't sign on to do all of your paperwork for you. And so if I were sticking around, I'd want to get more. I appreciate the chair for bringing this up, but I'd like to figure out if there's a way to say, as a state board, we're a pass-through for these grants, and we sign agreements with our local LEAs. And they sign and enter into the agreement that says, these are the things we expect you're going to do. And then we're hands off after that. The check gets cut. And, we trust you in everything else, and the state legislature trusts districts in everything else. Why are we not trusting you in everything else? And so I know we have a fiduciary responsibility to do it, but I think we could enter into an agreement that says, you're part of our fiduciary responsibility. And then we're out of it. The grant flows directly from us to you guys, and it would just take out one whole level of red tape, and the specialists here that are managing and saying, oh no, we didn't get the backup on that. We're going to have to see the backup on that before we can send it through up to the our accounting folks. And it just seems like it's a giant cluster.
Mark?
I don't know a good last name for you, Spencer, but I like saying UASBO, but I want to say a couple other things.
Spencer, UASBO.
USDB years ago, and I'm going to bring up USOR. And we're the finance committee. We have a duty and responsibility to the board. Remember, we're part of a board, and we're to bring betterments. And I like where this is going, but I'm swinging the pendulum back just a little bit here. If you open the floodgates and you have all that accountability, when the feds and the legislature start having all these problems, who's held accountable? We are, and our processes, and our group. So I think there's a happy place to get through all this, and frankly, pushing everything down to your good wife and my girls that are teachers, and having a district say, you fill out all that paperwork, is probably not the best thing but we on our end, we're not the ones making that happen. We don't dictate that. There's other people in the middle that are not even part of this conversation that goes to the BAs and to the superintendents and to the local school board and everything else. So, but back to us, I just want to make sure that we bring this back just a little bit. There is some accountability, and maybe what we need to know, Chair, is what is our duties and responsibilities, the federal money, all the different colors of money, before we start saying what we want and how we might want it to be, and start setting policy. Because I see us, I remember where we used to be. I know when I came onto the board where we were, which was not a pretty place in this committee meeting. And board member Wright, you were here. Don't want you to forget. No, it was a few years ago. And so we still have our duties and responsibilities as much as the BAs and the superintendents do. So if we're going to, I don't think we can quickly put this together, but we need to do it one process at a time. And what I've been seeking, and I've been eager with your approach to what's happening here, I would love to see you, ASBO, come to us and say, finance, I have this proposed betterment that's just going to slay it. This is going to make your life better and ours. And that's what I'm hoping will come. If we don't get it that way, then we have to do it this other way that Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones and Natalie's talking about, a little bit of collaboration here and there, because I'm sensitive to the teacher, and I think we all are, from the teacher all up through the process, but I don't want us to forget about our duties and responsibilities.
I think we get a lot. I used to go to doctor's offices and spend 10, 15 minutes filling out things. Now they hand me an iPad, and I can click on things, and I think they actually do it. And that poor person that I'd give like 5 sheets of paper, had to file them and keep them and stuff. And so I think there are ways to do that. It's hard, but we need to take that off. So why don't, next step here, I think, Spencer. Okay, excuse me, Spencer. You aren't visible enough. You just
You're so
blended
shy.
in the wall.
Jacket didn't
You're so
do
shy.
that.
You're hiding behind the beard.
Yeah.
So
I can barely see
it might
you.
be this. So first off, your iPad's never going to happen. This is public education. It's never going to happen. I mean, the day they walk in with an iPad and want a teacher to fill out a few forms is going to be like, I'll be dead. So, second thing is, I agree, and our fiduciary responsibility was not being fulfilled back when we all started on the board. And guess what? We knew that. We figured that out, because when the pre-Scott Jones, we call it BSJ, before Scott Jones, we had basically a spreadsheet that was coming in, and they wouldn't even give us the numbers. So but now we're in a spot where we can make the next step of betterment, and I love the idea of having, the business administrators, Leon,
We'd welcome that, yeah.
come in and say, hey, here's some things we think we could do that would streamline this process. I mean, I have a whole other rant, as Scott knows, I could start on about how money is passed through the Utah State Board of Education. The legislature says we want to give this money to this program, and the program expects that the money is going to flow to them. And then there's this giant moat in between the program and the called, Utah State Board of Education, that all these people are down in the moat like alligators, like as the money's flowing through. And it's not you guys, it's others. And so I'd love to see that come back and say, so we can get the most money with the least amount of time, with the highest percentage of thought that it's going to be accounted for, so that we can cover our bases. Hey, we're gonna, any federal audit that comes, we have a board that was willing to give the middle finger to the federal government and say, come and haul us out in handcuffs before we turn over that information to you. So, I mean, I wouldn't be worried about a federal audit with this board.
Can we send them first?
Yeah, we're gonna have the same people that took over the BLM land down in wherever that was, Kane County. They're gonna come up here and protect us from the federal government. So I wouldn't worry about them at all.
Right.
Spencer puts the fun in finance.
I hope, that Leon will keep talking to our staff. Maybe like to bring him back in September. And I think.
That give you enough time.
We probably need more time.
All right, maybe October, because
I think he's thinking January.
He's wanting to have something before the end of the year.
January when Spencer's gone.
See, Leon, if we
have
don't
a
get
better
it done
man in
now,
place,
you're going to be dealing with a bunch of, green as the hills, state school board members. Probably have no clue
Mark will still be here.
about anything except
New
Mark.
people might be better.
New people could be better.
Just drive by and throw the money at us.
They could have radically different priorities than some of us at the moment. So that would be ideal. So maybe October, possibly, because October, then we could have follow-up in December. Try and get something done. So
We could try and see what we could work on.
all right, that would be great. So that will be the goal to bring you back. I'm okay, even if it hampers our ability to put some hard standards, on how much time they have to respond, and create some real standards for compliance. I just it's like if I drive 55 miles per hour or less in a 55 mile per hour speed limit, I am safe. I'm not going to get pulled over. And the thought that you could drive 54 miles an hour,
Someone's going to shoot.
and still get pulled over is disconcerting, especially, with all these things happening. Okay, enough me talking. Thank you, Leon. This was far more interesting than I thought it was going to be. And I think we could have taken another hour easily with you. But is there anything else? Did you get it all in?
Oh, we'll if I can just quickly hit 1.5, just briefly.
Okay.
UPES is, that's the bridge, if you will, from LEA's system into your system to report on up.
With the alligators.
And that's been a challenge for some districts this year. I know there's been some, I put together this way back when the country made me talk in June, and so I know there's been some improvements since then. But as some LEAs, especially larger ones, have loaded up their budgets, they've got 200 pages back of errors. That's a little daunting when you get 200 pages back in errors and trying to fix all those. So we understand the process. I think we understand the need. If there could have just been a little bit more structured communication prior to this, I think it would have helped some of the concerns. And then on the grants management, I think it will be a good system. Natalie is, her and her team work very, very hard on this. We know that. They could just take the impact, put back from mainly the financial people, because that's, those are the ones who use the system here. We have our departments, they put in some of their budget information and their goals right up front, and then they just hit the send button, and then they're pretty much done with it. But it's the financial people who have to carry it on, the water to the end of the roll on all these grants. So as we work, maybe we could just work together on that, so that gets That's all I have. And again, I just want to thank the invitation to be here. And I just want to thank, your finance staff for all the hard work they do. They really do put in a great deal amount of time. And I know, end of the day, as it's been said, we're all about kids. That's why all of us are here. And they know that too. So we really appreciate their effort. Thank you for having me.
Committee, should we dare take a break? Will you actually be back here at 11 a.m. if we take a break?
I'm ready.
Should we just keep going?
I could use a break.
Okay, let's be back here at 11 a.m. Hey, I'm giving you a minute and a half longer than I promised.
I knew that I was going to be in trouble.
I'm not the last one.
Race? I didn't
Was.
know.
Yes, we are.
Oh, gosh.
Minutes reflect
Seriously?
that Board Member Hanson was the last one to sit down. No, you strike that. Okay, item 1.6, School Children's Trust Section Presentation. Deputy Jones.
Invite Paul Plant, the School Land Trust Section Director here at USBE to present.
Please, Ms. Plant, join us. Please.
So my understanding is that you want to know generally what it is that we do, office, and our budget. So I have a few slides, which I think you've seen, that I hope explain that. As you're aware, we've had some changes in our responsibilities based on a House Bill 404 that coming out of the most recent legislative session. But I've kind of highlighted some words in the code, but basically our responsibility is to administer the School Land Trust Program on your behalf. It's designated to the state board in the code. And then we have an increased emphasis on training, and that's of school community councils about the program and the other laundry list of things that they're responsible for. So we spend a lot of time training in various applications, both in person and kind of online trainings. You've also delegated to us the responsibility to manage the charter school school plans. It's kind of providing support for them the way that a district would provide support for their schools. And then, I remember when you're pulling that up, I think I'm about to the third slide. Let's see. And then we also prepare the distribution of funds to the schools. Yeah, I think you can go to the next one unless there's any questions here. So we have kind of a transition going on. As you're aware, there were 4 of us, or maybe not aware, I'm aware, you may not be, that we had 4 people in our section. The legislation reduced that to 3 FTEs. Have an increased emphasis on training. We're continuing to do what we have been doing in the past, but also increasing our online training. We did a WebEx training about 2 weeks ago. That was surprisingly in the middle of July, was quite well attended. It was held in this room. We had about 50 people here, and then there were about 50 people online. We intend to break up kind of the basic training into short little pieces so that a council can come together when they're doing their elections, for instance, and they pull down the election one. It takes them 4 minutes to look at, and they make their plan for their elections. So we're headed in that direction. We have found some increased responsibilities in trying to transfer to this Land Trust Protection Advocacy Committee. I've been appointed to be one of the members of that committee. The SITLA board has appointed their 2 members. The SITFO board hasn't, or the treasurer. So when the committee is complete, then we will start the work on trying to find the advocate
So then I think we can go to the next slide. This is the distribution to schools in the year we just ended, and the funds that just Natalie and her people helped us send out like last week. So the schools, for the most part, have those funds in their hands right now so they can start implementing their plans. The next slide will show you the training events that we did last year. The next one shows the ones that we have scheduled. Next slide. shows the ones that are scheduled up to now. About this time of year is when we start to have districts, schools, organizations call and want to schedule because school's starting. Some of those we'll probably do online because next thing we're going to talk about is a little budgetary problem we have. So some of our trainings will probably be online this year. So this is our budget. This is the $727,700 is the total appropriation for House Bill 404. That 211 was set aside for the Protection and Advocacy Office. However, it didn't quite get handled correctly in the appropriation process, so it's actually here, but it has been set aside to go to the Protection Advocacy Office. So that leaves the school trust section with that $512,600. I've had some conversations with Deborah, and she provided a sort of temporary budget, right? Things are in flux because we're at the end of the year and the beginning of the next year. But the fixed costs for our section is higher than the appropriation, as you can see. And then when I add in the expenses I have control over, it's another $22,700. So that puts us about $49,000 less than the appropriation.
Scott? Chair and Finance Committee members, so Paul's spot on. There's $211,100 that was set aside, transferred to the Advocacy Office for state fiscal year 19. However, in subsequent meetings, one in which Chair Huntsman and Vice Chair Cummins attended, the State Treasurer said, hey, you don't have to transfer that to us. It's highly unlikely I'll have an advocacy, what's the title, advocacy director? An advocate appointed any earlier than the first part of the calendar year, or it'll be well after the calendar year. So for now, we're good as far as having, even though we show the $48,725 negative balance, we haven't transferred that money, nor do I expect we'll have to any time before the advocate is appointed. The other piece to this is that even after the advocate's appointed, Paula will likely stay decisively engaged with advising, assisting with the transition to the Advocacy Committee. The point is that both us and the Treasurer Damshin, are unified going into the legislative session to get this corrected, right? And whether that's $211,100 minus $48,725, and that we keep that, but we want to do it the right way, and the process would be by way of the legislative session to ensure that everything is accounted for and all that, because we just don't know at this point, when the advocate will be appointed in aspects like that. So we want to be transparent. We want to make sure that you're understanding that by way of the bill, by 404, that $211,100 set aside for transfer. But at this point, out of the session, that's not necessary to do, and it's agreed upon by all the offices, Treasurer's Office, R, SITLA, SITFO. Dave Ure from SITLA was there as well for the meeting. So for now, we're fine. We haven't transferred the money. It's going to have to keep our, keep towards the legislative session, get this all worked out.
That's a good question, Joe.
So the next slide just is a break. Oh, sorry.
So my question is, we created the Trust Lands Advisory Committee board. Are there extra costs?
The only real extra cost is that we do have some people who just travel investment. Right now we have two. Every time we hold a meeting, it costs us about $200. So that. So in the next slide, I have built that into the to the in-state travel, so that we make sure we have money to cover. There are 2 others who may start requesting travel reimbursement as well.
So I think that's one of those things that the board should be. That's our advisory. And is that working? I mean, because we changed that advisory committee. Is it working?
I think it's working differently than before, but I think it's great because we brought recommendations to you that have come from them, and I think because it came from that broad, diverse group, able to kind of adopt their recommendations. I have a couple more I need to bring, not quite finalized, but yeah, I think they're doing good work. So that's just a fixed cost. We kind of already talked about that. This is small numbers, I know, compared to what you deal with, but this just explains what Superintendent Jones just explained to you. It appears that probably that total amount is not enough ongoing. 211 is probably not enough for the advocacy office to have 2 people. Right now, it might work out okay because the treasurer is going to house them in his office and he doesn't have additional building expenses. But eventually we'll have to move out. So we've kind of agreed to have that discussion about what is the real cost of this bill, and we'd go to the legislature together and say this is what we think it's going to cost, as you know, to fix it on an ongoing basis instead of just the one-time fix.
Linda?
So this is kind of a mixed financial and political. We'll try our best. This makes me a little bit nervous, and it's because I've heard rumors that there will be legislation coming to remove your office from our office this next year. Heard that as well? Yes.
I have, but let me tell you what else I have.
Because I would fight to keep you guys here. I think it's important that you're here. But
in that meeting that Superintendent Jones referred to, where Chair Huntsman participated, everybody in that room, there was something in the legislation that they didn't like. Really, right? Everybody in the room said this is something I would like to see come out or I would like to have changed. But there was agreement in that room that we wouldn't make any changes until we at least had a process in place before you start making changes, right? Where you have an office and a person in place. I know that there has been some others who said that they were going to come after the office to move them under the state treasurer. But I believe in my most recent conversations with those individuals, they have agreed they're not going to do anything until the office gets set up.
which could be how long, right?
Well, but okay. Maybe I'm going too far, but let me just tell you what my goal is. We have legislation that some of us didn't like, some people liked it, some people didn't like it, but it's what it is, right? So my goal is to try to get an advocacy office in place and an advocate that you all feel comfortable with. You feel like that's the best advocate that you, it's better than anybody you've ever hired or employed. So that's my goal. That's where I'm headed. That's what I'm trying to make happen.
Can it be an advocate who doesn't create this problem? This has all been created for us by our last advocate. And while I didn't acknowledge the chair to ask me to, I'm just looking around this room, and I don't think everybody in this room believes or understands that their conversations are going to be broadcast over the airwaves. But I'm looking at these Shure green microphones that are above all these lights, and what? And they're all live.
They're all microphones.
And they're all microphones.
This is the only one that's working, and you weren't here when we talked about that when
Oh.
we first started. That's the only one that's working today. So.
And that's why the others are green?
Yeah, they're not hooked up. They're not working. That's what I was told this morning. So.
Well, interesting that,
In the future, they may be, though.
yeah, but I mean, but it's odd that if they're not hooked up, that they've got a green light on them. Just saying, I mean.
Take all
This isn't
conversations
hooked up.
outside.
Yeah, sorry.
But I just wanted to be that, I'm trying to be transparent with the public. And, if that's a rumor that I'm hearing, I just wanted to go on the record as saying, I think department belongs here. So.
Okay. Got a lot on our plate. Are you seeing any trends in good projects schools are doing that seem to be more popular or seem to be adding a lot of value?
I think all kinds of things are happening. I think when things are being driven from the local level and they have some funding to do something with it, it's really great things are happening. We're seeing the largest amount of money is spent for people. So in schools that don't have enough people, they don't have enough aides, or they need to hire a part-time teacher, that's the biggest piece of money. The second largest piece of money is technology. Presentations you've had this morning are indicating the needs for technology, right? So that's the next largest.
Okay, briefly, Kathleen, then Spencer.
I have seen great things coming out of trust lands. Just the fact that we have been able to expand our use of trust lands money has been phenomenal in our schools, and my teachers and my principals and my administrators are so excited by that expansion of the use of money. I know in the schools that I've worked at across the whole entire valley that trust lands makes a difference in everything we do. So I'm here as a firsthand witness to the great things that are going on in our schools. My question is, I'm trying to find where in the State Board of Education I would learn about trust lands, and I'm not finding it. My concern is sometimes a principal will hijack trust lands money, and it's not supposed to work that way, or it's supposed to be an agreement with the community. Can you direct me, or maybe we can have a private conversation about where we could make that information a little bit easier to find, or because I think I'm a little techie. Don't ask Jared that, because the other day I had a problem.
We actually have a different website.
Okay.
And so really the best place to find it is just when you go to the menu.
Okay.
And then it's listed and it'll take you directly to the different website.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the work you've done.
Spencer.
I too am going to start this out by saying I appreciate the work that you've done. But let's not, I don't know if there is on the website where a principal that hijacks the money and that the council can send a note, a confidential note to you so that you can, fix that.
You need your own hotline.
But let's also understand that this is $13 per student. So an elementary school that has 300 kids in it, we're talking about $3,900. This is not a big number.
It is a big number to your elementary schools.
They're getting thousands, though, right?
I just said what the number is.
I know.
I just did the math. It's $13 per student, 300 in a student, it's $3,900. How many full-time aides can you hire with $3,900?
Well, how much is the average elementary?
I don't know that exactly.
Could we use your slide? Go back to the slide that said.
Well, what I'm saying is, when I was a community council chair, we were getting more than that, and I think that
Well, how many were in your school?
Most schools are not
about 500 kids.
Okay, all right.
And we were getting a lot more than that, and it's gone up every year. So I'm not sure that $3,900 is accurate.
I'm going to give you the accurate number for your school.
It was $10 a year before. Okay, this question can be taken offline, does not need to be part of the public discussion. Thank you, Paula.
Hey, when a board member wants to have the floor, it's part of the public discussion. You don't get to determine that, Joel.
I just throw them out now.
$6,500 for five.
We're getting more than that.
I'm telling you, you're not. Go back to the slide.
Well, sometimes they'll use that money to enhance another fund. So maybe that's what's going on. So for me, like I was a half-time teacher, and they used two funds to fulfill that requirement.
For the record, Spencer's right. 13 times 500 is what he said.
Go back one, Scott. It was it. You hit it. Okay. average $13 a student in 2019. My only point is, I have to go up on the Hill and I have to hear legislators tell me how much that they're funding schools through this. And I don't want to diminish what $74 million is. But if they think they're solving the problem like they are with the Suicide Prevention Act, I
agree.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to say. That's why I was being honoring.
And it's not, I wonder if it's worth the trouble, but apparently they're finding good things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along to item 1.7. RDA considerations and results statewide. This is a topic that I love. Make sure I might have something. In my own Alpine school district, recently, they came down with the Facebook RDA. And they put enormous pressure on my Alpine school district to approve over $130 million. They initially gave them 3 days, and they said they couldn't give the name of the entity to the public. People behind this included the governor himself and the governor's Office of Economic Development and a number of very influential people. They were quite hard on him. They pushed back and got another week, eventually approved it 6-1. But I am alarmed and concerned about the pressure being put on our schools, because our schools understand that economic development is education, while our schools don't understand Facebook data centers. Maybe they're great, maybe they're awesome, but it's just kind of outside of our mission. Kathleen, thank you for listening to me.
I'm with you.
Thank you, Mark, also for listening
I'm with
to
you.
me. And thank you, John, for listening to me. So here, I am really open to this, but I almost feel like this is sort of like, I hope this analogy isn't too crude and doesn't get me in trouble, but it's like if you have a 16-year-old daughter, is it maybe good to say, that she can say to the boy who's taking her out, no, I have to be home by midnight, and no, I cannot park in a car with you, in a remote area. These are standards that my parents have given me, because the boy can be very dominating and untoward at times. Well, that's what I feel like happened to Alpine School District in some ways. They came down and put enormous pressure by all these people on them on very short notice. And they were 65-70% of the tax break.
I don't know how you can allow this process to happen outside of the process established by state statute. I know they used these interlocal agreements, and that's how they did it, but it was a complete workaround of how the process is supposed to work. Because we said it was too much.
So my question is, this is a discussion.
They took us out of it.
Yeah,
the state school board is now out of it.
They took everybody out of it by just doing interlocal agreements.
Yeah.
So what's the goal of this discussion?
It's to set up parking,
Okay.
set up dating rules and parking restrictions of your young teenagers.
Yes.
But with regards to RDA, like the state school board ought to take a position that says we don't agree with you going around the system that's in place by the state legislature. It's a bill that we ought to request being filed.
Is there a policy that we can look at? What's the policy number?
It's going to take a bill.
Okay.
They take a bill.
We ought to come up with it. We sit up there and talk for hours and hours about our budget priorities. This is the kind of stuff we ought to be talking about and taking to the legislature and saying, this is not right, and shining some light on it.
It's like we need to establish the standards, because if they don't have those standards, it's like when a 14-year-old gets approached with alcohol. If they haven't established their standards or what they're going to do, not good things are going to happen. And we've got to establish those standards, so I think they are.
I wouldn't want to be one of your kids. I mean, you have some of these schools, standards.
I am just trying.
I've been in this car for 13 minutes with you parked in front of your house. I only have 2 more minutes.
Let the record reflect that any boy or girl gets serious. My kids, I run background checks on them. See where they are. Here's 3 ideas. I don't know if we can do these at the state school board level. 30 days between the receipt of a final plan and the vote. So that there's no more of this 3-day gun to your head thing, that it can get out to the public, that they can think about it, and some other things, especially when they're not even bringing them in until 3 days before.
But Chair, aren't we really trying to get to the heart of Facebook 2.0 deals? I mean, and that's going to take a bill. We don't have any of this stuff we're discussing is going to have to take a bill because we don't have the power to do it.
We don't have the ability to make them require?
No.
All right.
I don't think we do. I mean, does anybody else? Scott, do you think we have the power to say, we might have the power to say we require 30 days if you're going to bring something, our internal, but I don't think we do.
Do you have anyone that would run that bill?
Great, if we could.
So Chair, just going to committee member Stokes' point, the law actually allows them to do what they do.
Yeah.
It's in the law.
Yeah, I know.
So what I would ask is, for the benefit of the group, if you want to look at the legislation, then that's really where you should go.
Where would you find that?
Well, we don't have the ability of the state school board. We don't have the ability of the state school board to impose that.
Let's bring it back next week. I'll make the motion. To come back into finance. Let's bring that. Go ahead.
I think this is where you need your AEs to weigh in on this too, for that.
So let's bring the bill and have a legal review on that process and have it come back. To finance.
I mean, 2 more things I'd love to put on there is that on everyone.
You want that as a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my motion.
Okay, let me just make 2 more things. I'd love to say that every school district has to put a hard cap on any tax break they give. Meaning it can't just be a blank check. It says, okay, you only go up to this amount.
Let's talk about when we bring so we understand our boundaries. So
yeah.
Let's bring that, let's heighten our awareness. Right. And so that would fit really well, Chair Wright, in the next discussion, knowing what we can and can't do. And then you can add and take.
Okay, well, this is what I'm just sending to AGs. I would love it that every property tax break or every RDA or whatever their name might be called is listed in their financial audit every year. And they just say, okay, this is what we gave. This is how much property taxes have been waived. And this is how much they have now paid. So you could just go back and see kind of a ledger. So next time they come to you with a $130 million tax break, say, well, let's go back and look at the other ones in the past and see how they've panned out. Because I don't know if they even have data. I mean, we just talked earlier today about how a $12,000 grant can get audited to death. But, we have a $130 million tax break 15 years later. Can the public even find out how good it's been? So I don't know if we have the ability to do any of these things. If not, yeah, this would be a great thing to take to the legislature. There are very narrow, but very well-funded folks who have enormous incentive to keep the status quo.
I think that we should talk to one of your Utah County legislators who does a lot of this, and his name is Senator Kurt Bramble. We ought to actually have Senator Bramble come in and have a discussion about this.
Okay.
At the Finance Committee.
Ooh, we could invite him.
Yeah. Just talk through it. Maybe he'd even be willing to say, understand what our frustration is, because it is a frustration. By the way, there's an update on my rant produced. See, my rants are useful. My rant produced an update on the average per. It's like more like $100 per person per student.
It's 130. It was my error in the presentation.
130 is missing a 0. But 13 was pathetic.
Okay.
Right.
For the record,
Look, he
just got us a
Chair
raise.
Hansen was correct on the grader level, but you can do math, Spencer.
Can do math.
We'll concede that. So whoever taught you multiplication in third grade,
Or how to use a calculator,
or how to use a calculator,
just as equals.
should be commended. But Board Member Hansen had the greater depth and insight on this topic.
On all topics.
All right. We have a motion to bring this back next month after further analysis on what we can do. And also, Deputy Jones?
Chair, if I may, respectfully, if you'll clarify exactly what you want brought back as part of the motion. We're heading towards the AG's rendering an opinion. You could detail that so Cammie can log that correctly, and then we can follow up with the AG's because they're not here for this meeting.
What restrictions? Like I can tell my 14-year-old son, no alcohol in the house. Okay, bottom line. And if you do, you lose your phone in the car and everything. Do we have any ability at all to restrict the ability or put any sort of discipline on these schools to protect them from, I'd almost consider predatory behavior on their property tax base? And if we don't, then I think, yeah. Is that all right if I invite Senator Bramble to join us?
I think so, but you have to understand this is a legislative discussion, and what our discussion should be with the legislators is we felt like that we were taken out of the process in a cuter than by half mechanism, and that's number one. And number two, we have a fiduciary responsibility, I believe, to guard the finances of Utah's school children. We're their voice. And we heard about all the voices upstairs yesterday, but on this one, we are their voice. And so when you take a process, although it was legal, I guess, I'm assuming it was, and you bypass the RDA and EDA and CDA processes we have in government, this was just a giant workaround. And this is what happens when you don't have a strong and healthy press, because it was never talked about, really.
Mark,
I think before we bring someone in and have them explain themselves, I think we need to know, refresh our memory and be caught up to date on what's in statute.
Okay.
And was it followed? And what statute did they follow, which was the workaround? And have that information before we go call somebody in on the carpet.
Okay, yeah, let's have that discussion next month, and then.
Oh, I don't want to call Kurt Bramble in on the carpet. Trust me, he'll always win on that, just like Linda did.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ready for that.
Okay.
I think that although your points are well taken, I think a better conversation to be would how much revenue are we losing towards our schools when we do these things, and is there an average? And I know
just even asking that question is almost heresy.
Well, we should have that number and have some kind of number that we can actually talk to, because it's not about our feelings, it's about lost revenue. And so when we talk about doing what's right for the kids, that is maybe not as impactful as the finances that were lost in this deal towards our kids. And so we can better the process by bettering our schools, by creating more transparency. So I don't know if every county is the same. Of course it's not, but I think that we could possibly have a dollar amount for these tax breaks, because when we talk about bringing businesses into our communities, we talk about how it's going to improve our communities. But by giving tax breaks, we're actually maybe decreasing the value of our communities because we don't have that investment in our education. So I'd like to take out our feelings and look at the dollars and cents that potentially was lost. And I think that might be part of the conversation. That
my feelings weren't hurt.
My feelings were hurt.
It was about the dollars that were lost to Utah school children.
It would be interesting to just have that, because maybe these do make enormous economic sense. It's kind of a dark hole and we don't know.
But if you don't look at the unintended consequences, then you're not really seeing the big picture. So did we really gain that much, or did we also lose more than we gained? So that's my question. So
See, that's more subjective analysis.
no, I think that's more objective. We're just asking for the lost revenue to outweigh the tax break.
You're right. Yeah, just that. Yeah, and that would be wonderful to have that for the public to see. Because I think a great, really healthy discussion.
We can use that as a test case, and then maybe pick another RDA that was smaller and say, what was the lost revenue for this school district? I mean, just possibly 2 test cases to show if we think that we lost revenue in that field. Would that be something that the AG could use to illustrate that point?
Is my perception now that almost any entity that's big enough to threaten and say, Alpine School District, we're going to go to Provo, we're going to go to Jordan, we're going to go to Canyons, is now getting an RDA. Because they have the leverage to kind of scare and threaten. Scott?
What I recommend to the Finance Committee is that you, first of all, have the AEGs come back and advise you.
Okay.
Then, from there, if you feel like you want to get further develop and get information, then I really feel we'd have to go outside of even our own staff to get that information. So that will take some time. So I would recommend that for the September meeting, you get the AGs to offer you their opinion, what you can't do, all those types of things, and then go maybe for October or November to allow us enough time to pick or select ones that we could invite to come back and give. And I just think turnaround time would be too challenging on that.
Okay.
And it may even be for our AAGs too. But that would be my recommendation to you, Chair, is that you have, first of all, get your AAGs to research this, come back to you, and make your decision on 2 different types to come and speak to that.
Mark made that comment, I think, 10 minutes ago. Exactly, almost. So that motion's still on the table. All in favor?
Still there.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's what we'll do. Thank you, Scott, for clarifying us. Okay, moving along. We still have 22 minutes. We are on 1.8 Annual Assurance of Compliance by Local School Boards Amendment.
Chair, just invite Deputy Superintendent Stallings and her policy advisor, or our policy advisor, Jeff.
Please, come on up, Jeff.
So making the rounds.
And Angie, and tell us about this.
Yes, first I'd love to introduce, I think you all have been introduced. For those of you who don't know, Jeff Van Holten is our new policy advisor. So he worked with Assistant Superintendent Natalie Grange and on the development of this rule, and of course, so Natalie, if you would like to pipe in or correct or supplement anything that we say, let us know. So, but essentially, I think you're all familiar with the annual assurances that are sent out to our LEAs for them to ensure that they're complying with and uploading certain required documents for state law and federal law. And so this rule is up, it's not up for its 5-year review, but it was due for some significant changes to codify what is our current practice and take a look at that. So that's kind of the background. And so I don't know, Jeff, if you want to go through it, or Natalie, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Just Angie said, essentially what you're going to see here, and just so you know, Section 3 should be underlined. Not showing up the new.
That's fixed.
But you will notice there's a big deletion kind of starting on line 61. That is where the existing rule highlighted very specifically the assurances that needed to be made by the LEAs. The issue that Natalie noticed with this list is it was very incomplete and also included things assurances for. So the new approach that we're taking with this rule, we're still working on some language and fine-tuning it, is to make it slightly more general so that we don't have to update the rule every time law changes or you change a rule that requires an assurance. We're going to now require that there be a list of those assurances available on the website, which we're updating. We incorporate that list by reference here in this rule. That way, we can update the list without having to roll up for a 30-day public comment period and waiting essentially almost 8 weeks to get this rule changed and amended so that Natalie can be collecting the assurances she actually is supposed to be getting. Go ahead.
Scott, could you move up to line 19? That is the section of code that actually incorporates the list of assurances by reference. So instead of the LEAs and our staff looking to the rule for the list, it directs the superintendent to create this annual assurances of compliance and then post it on our website. The space there will be a date. So by the time this rule comes to you in September, we should have that we'll have that list compiled, and you can essentially adopt them at the same time. That this is kind of the way that you incorporate published documents or requirements by reference is you do them at the same time, and then you post them on the website. And so then we would post the place on the website. So that's the idea. And again, all of this should be underlined. For some reason, it's not, but this is new language. But it's kind of the middle ground of, instead of listing every single thing in the rule, you have a list that's created somewhere else, but it's incorporated into the rule. And then the LEAs understand that legally they are bound to provide those assurances. So.
So I just want to understand. So we're going to approve the list as well? Is it going to come to us annually? And
yes. That's a good question. And this is, I apologize, but this is something I'll be asking to Natalie and Scott just so we can be on the same page. Do we want to, because there's a question of whether we can get that list ready for September, or do we want to bring it here when, you have it right now? Oh, okay, great. And so if you wanted to, maybe we could upload it to board docs right now, and part of the motion could be to approve the list as well as, the changes to the rule.
So can I add, so as I was compiling the list to send out to the LEAs, which was due by the 1st of July, I went back to the board rule because I noticed some inconsistencies. And so the reason I requested a change in the board rule is because I noticed, just exactly like was indicated, there's stuff missing. I consolidated all of our federal assurances into this list, which that wasn't even in the rule. The date in the rule was inaccurate. It said that the assurances are due by October. We've been collecting them by July 1st for years, so we're not sure how that, and then the fact that there was no link to R277-114, or that link was a little unclear. So there are some penalties or issues, non-compliance issues if LEAs don't submit the list. The primary issue is that if the federal assurances aren't submitted by July 1st, LEAs aren't authorized to spend their federal grant funds on the first of a fiscal year. So the timing issue that Angie is discussing is that we need to figure out exactly when we can get the annual list updated. We can always publish the old list, and generally the only thing that will change in the future is legislation or things that change in federal law. So this last revision this year was the biggest, I think it's probably the biggest revision we've done in about 5 or 6 years. It shouldn't change much next year. This is largely just standardizing a practice that we already have. And as indicated earlier in our discussion with the business administrators, this assurance list will actually be in the grants management system next year. So it'll be released probably sometime May, June for the LEAs to look through and then require it to be submitted by July.
So I'm looking at R27714, and I'm not seeing where that list would actually be. Sorry, I'm not as up to speed as you guys are. And my concern is, and I'm not trying to be an instructionist or anything, but whenever I see a lot of things crossed out and saying, oh, it's going to be put someplace else, I see reference to lots of different sections and codes and stuff like that. And when you talk about how long it took us to put things on and take things off, it is kind of important not to move a ship too quickly. So is there going to be a process that is as robust for updating that list still, or is it just going to be an annual thing?
and this will probably be answered by both, but
Okay.
I think one thing that is helpful to note is that everything that's on that list, we are required to collect generally by somebody else. So either federal law requires us to collect that or state law. And so in some ways it's out of our control, but we do want to update the list because it's part of, I think, the nice thing about this rule was it's one place where you could go and say, well, here's all the assurances that you're going to have to, LEA, you're going to have to be prepared to submit these reports. You've got to comply with these sections of law. However, because of the timing, and the session ends mid-March, and then, of course, by May 1 or June 1, we've got to start collecting this and informing LEAs. We are in this weird conundrum of how do we keep this rule up to date, because that takes, 3 months to do.
So does that whole list fall under R277114.3? Where do we find that in that?
114 is corrective action plans and penalties the LEAs incur if they don't complete compliance requirements. So the list itself, it looks like this. It's right here on my computer. All the LEAs already signed it this year.
Okay.
We'll just post this list to the website. We just don't know where we're going to put it yet. The old one will be on the website. If nothing changed, then that will be the updated one. If something changes, we'll go in and add a section or take a section out, and that will be done for the year, and then we will use it.
So there's not like a literal list here. You have a list that I can't see. Is that what you're trying? Because I'm trying to find a list, and I'm not seeing one. Okay.
Let me do this. Let me put it up on the screen.
No, now I understand, but when you kept saying that the list would be there, I'm like, where's this list? So it's not a list that's external, it's a list that's kind of known to you guys, and it's referenced in all these rules. I got it now, I understand. But that's kind of an information that you kind of knew that I didn't. So.
Sorry, yes, and we will make it publicly available, and that's why that www.schools.gov, when we find the place to put it on the web, by September, when this is finally adopted, there will be a location you could click on there.
Okay. Thanks. I totally understand now. Thank you.
Spencer.
So, and you're in this list going to incorporate things that are in the statute, I'm assuming. So it'll be over on a separate document, because I don't want to be the school board member that takes the Pledge of Allegiance out. And it's in state statute.
It is in state statute, so
Right.
they're already required to.
That will be in the list.
Yes.
Right? Because it's the one thing that my wife says is like the unifying thing of the school every day when they come on over I've had to hear this rant, come over the PA system and they all stand up and say the pledge. He says it's a great thing. But it's also at least once a year, students shall be instructed that participation in the Pledge of Allegiance is voluntary and not compulsory. And not only is it acceptable for someone to choose not to participate, they need this for the NFL, something to choose to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance or religious or other reasons, but students should show respect for any student who chooses not to participate.
Amen. We have 11 minutes left. Okay. I'm ready for a motion on this.
We approve R277108 on first and second, does it need to be?
First reading.
First reading, and send it to the full consideration.
We don't need a second committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye, that's unanimous. Can that be on the consent calendar?
Report out on second and final.
It's just the reading.
Okay. Moving on to item 1.92 from Pupil Transportation Work Group Report.
Chair, will you
Board
invite,
note, it's 11:50.
we invite Jamie Barrett, Ron Litchfield, the Business Administrator John Larson from Jordan to the table.
Please, join us.
She only started.
Just for background, you've been advised, by way of the progress updates and all that, the work group convened to go through it. I won't take up the details to Jamie and John to report that and Ron. What you have in your backups is the actual report that I believe we're scheduled to present on August 14th, Public Education Appropriations meeting. So our job as your staff is to, anytime we can, is to let or advise, at least in the committee setting, board members on what we're going to present to the legislature. This is an ongoing, I think, timing though, allow us to put this in front of the whole board. Obviously, August 14th will happen before the next meeting, so just for everybody. So, Sheriff, you'll turn it over to Jamie. Jamie
Barrett, Minimum School Program Administrator. I'll start on page 1 and just kind of give a synopsis. During the 2008 legislative session, the Public Education Appropriation Subcommittee received a request to increase funding to transportation to 85% as what is outlined in statute. There was some comparability differences between what the state was saying was at 85% and what our school districts were claiming was at 85%. After that issue was discussed, the Public Appropriation Subcommittee asked that the USBE hold a work group to convene and to actually decide exactly what should be measured at 85%, how is that done, and how can we replicate that every year going forward. In statute, there's a Transportation Advisory Committee that is supposed to be made up of school district superintendents, business officials, and school district transportation supervisors. This is on the page 2 now. This work group meets annually, however, it wasn't fully staffed, so the first priority that we did was to make sure that that committee was fully staffed. We reached out to the Superintendents Association, USBE. We reached out to the Transportation Association and got nominations for that committee. We have 3 superintendents on this committee, 3 business administrators, and 3 transportation directors. And in addition to, we had representation from the Fiscal Analyst's Office and the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. All of us met. We had 2 total meetings. Prior to the first meeting, I did a Camtasia video, which basically went through how the current funding formula works, what are all the data inputs that we use to calculate that formula. So everybody kind of had a homework assignment, and they watched that. They came prepared with questions. During that first meeting, we answered questions regarding to how the funding formula currently works, how the state is measuring 85%, and how school districts are measuring 85%. What came out of those meetings is that during the formula basically takes 2 years old data due to timing differences with when we get financial data reported to us on what exactly transportation expenditures are. Also from the transportation directors, we get bus statistical reports on actual eligible miles versus total odometer miles. When we get all that data, we are about 2 years behind when we put that out. So when the state is looking at 85%, we're comparing the current appropriation to data that's 2 years old. When a school district is looking at the 85%, they're taking that year that just closed, they're looking at the appropriation they received for that year and comparing, well, they're looking at the appropriation for those expenditures and comparing it to that appropriation for that year. So they're comparing 18 to 18 or 17 to 17, where we're comparing 18 to possibly 16 or 17. So there's a timing difference on looking at data, which is the biggest issue when we're trying to compare 85% at a state level to 85% at a school district level. One of the recommendation that came out of the committee on page 4 that was spearheaded by Business Administrator John Larson, sitting to the right of me, is that we not change the distribution formula because that is working as it should, but actually change how the appropriation should be calculated that we give to the legislature. And if you go to that figure 1, Scott, if you go to the next page, how we want to do this is we want to take eligible miles, actual eligible miles from approved routes, compare that to the total odometer for the state for all of the buses in the fleet for the state, and actually get a percentage of eligible miles. We take that percentage and we times that by the actual transportation cost, which excludes bus purchases. Those were taken out of an eligible cost a few years ago. And we come up with the actual eligible cost based on eligible miles. And that then becomes the appropriation or the requested appropriation from the legislature for to and from. We then would take that money and run it through our already current formula to distribute for that year. So because of timing differences, we use this same approach, but we look at 17, 16, and 15. get how much eligible miles were for each of those 3 years, compare that to the appropriations and eligible costs for those 3 years, and project that forward. So we're able to give the legislature an estimate on what that appropriation should be 2 years ahead because of timing differences. That is the recommendation, one of the recommendations as we flip to page 6. Sure, sorry.
Legislation says it's a percentage of costs, isn't it?
So right now, the appropriation is prior year's appropriation times by student growth, and that becomes the new appropriation for the new year.
So they reimburse costs, right?
Correct.
Because I almost wish they would reimburse miles, and that would give districts an incentive to
It does.
the efficiency.
The formula takes in eligible miles, so as you're a more efficient district, we base it on averages throughout the entire state. So if you're more efficient, then you're getting paid above, right, for the averages. So it puts in efficiencies throughout the current formula, which is why we don't want to change the formula, because the one functioning right now does provide for efficiencies in statute.
Spencer and then Natalie.
Can you go back up to the spreadsheet on? So what is in eligible miles? Because I noticed there's two numbers there. There's total odometer miles, which I'm assuming is just what it means. Every bus in every district, what their total odometer miles were for the year, and that's it. And then there is this other one, eligible miles.
So eligible miles, so we have all the transportation directors send in an A1 report, which basically lists every route that each of those school districts are running. Go through a monitoring process, and we look at to find out eligible routes, basically. So though right now, to and from school pupil transportation funding does not pay for activities, it doesn't pay for field trips, doesn't pay for school choice routes. There's some ineligible routes that a school district at a local board level could choose to run, but it's not included in the actual to from pupil transportation. So there's the difference between odometer and eligible miles.
Okay, so
I can make a date analogy here for you.
if you'd help me with that, yeah. So let's see, what's the difference between eligible miles and total odometer miles? Somebody that's good at math or has their calculator out.
6,000 something, almost 7 million. 7 million.
But you figure that into eligible miles and odometer miles are figured in as an average, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, those are actual numbers. So the averages are taken in when we actually run it through the formula.
I get that those are actual miles, but you are then using percent of eligible miles of the total miles as 1 and 2.
Correct.
So it is, so total miles is figured in here, and they're getting a reimbursement for that to some degree.
So they're not reimbursed based on total odometer miles. Is that your question?
Yeah, I want to know, because it says the next thing is percentage of eligible miles for total miles is 1 and 2.
Is that relevant?
Okay, so in order to come up with a new way to ask the legislature for the appropriation instead of doing it off of student growth, because that is not really a relevant factor for transportation, we're trying to figure out exactly how much of the total eligible miles that a school is running is actually, or total odometer miles is actually eligible to from miles. So we're trying to narrow that pot down and then say, okay, out of all of the costs for transportation, total cost, so that includes field trips, I mean, that includes everything. Of that total cost, how much was just for those eligible miles? What did it actually cost the school district to run for those eligible miles? And then say, okay, based on that, that's the appropriation that we need.
Because you know where I'm going here with asking. I think that we ought to appropriately pay for to and from, and I think it ought to be 100%. I don't feel it appropriate that we pay for anything else. If the district wants to do that, or the activities wants to do that, or this is back to this question about the Utah High School Student Activity Association. We don't have any control over them. But clearly, there is something here in the formula. I know we're not covering 100%, but the idea is that we ought to be, arguing with the legislature over 100% of to and from, because and they ought to cover that.
So we're kind of out of time. Let's say we're going to give like 10 more minutes, but we are going to wrap up everything.
I'm done.
And fit it in. And Spencer, that would definitely work best in an ideal world. But this has been a point of huge contention, and to get to this point, enormous effort, which I think you appreciate. And I believe you guys think this is something from what you've heard the legislature that they'll actually take seriously and potentially pass?
This is the recommendations out of the committee. I mean, we had Ben Leishman and Jacob Wright on the committee also as we were going through these recommendations. And this is what the committee wants to recommend to the board with your approval to then take to the August 14th meeting.
This is like how the world should work. Like the way you guys put this and churned this out and did this, I just wish we could do this on all the dysfunction in our public education system. So I think it's awesome. Mark?
I'd like to make a motion that we forward all 4 recommendations from this report to the board.
I think that's awesome. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we might have had an answer for.
I don't need it.
Okay.
But aren't we going to deal with teacher supplies and materials?
Yes, we are. I am sorry we didn't give the 3 of you more time. This is outstanding.
But thank you for all your work.
You wanted to talk more, didn't you?
Meaningful work.
Why don't you just go back there and discuss it, and it'll pick it up on the official record.
It is so impressive what you all did, and I apologize that we didn't give you as much kudos.
It's also impressive, if I can, Chair,
Please, Terry.
that your staff here helped organize this well. From the very beginning, these two and Jamie helped put this, I think I can say that appropriately, helped organize this appropriately so that it did go well from the beginning to this good outcome that you're seeing here today. So I just want to make sure that's also on the record.
Absolutely. I want to give that some applause.
We're not applying
Only 30 seconds. We're behind schedule. Let's go.
We can tackle hard things, and we can solve problems at the state school board with our hardworking staff taking the lead.
1.10.
And I love it. Okay, teacher supplies and materials. Go ahead. Who's in charge of this?
Board Member Hanson.
Board Member Hanson.
I'll give you kind of the high level summary here. I've been talking to teachers online, and they've been discussing with me that they're concerned that they're getting their supply money too late because they're getting it after school starts, and all the school supply sales and everything are in July and August. And so they used to be able to just keep their receipts, but a lot of them are now getting gift cards. And so their district gives them a card and all their money's on there, and they're not getting those until after the school year starts. And so I came to Scott and said, how soon can we have this money available, and how soon does this work? And so he
Chair,
has a suggestion, I think.
Well,
maybe
not a suggestion, just I think it's for the benefit of the group, we really need to define what the current process is as far as the distribution goes. So now we talk to them.
So just really quickly, the legislature makes the funding available to us on July 1. So we can't distribute it any earlier than that, and our current process for distribution to the LEAs sends money out at the end of the month. So at the end of July. At the end of July.
Right.
So from the Board of Education perspective, unless there's a legislative change to make the funds available earlier, we aren't able to change our process and forward fund the districts any sooner than we currently do.
Could we fund in the middle could we make sure that it got to the districts the middle of July instead of the end of
With our current processes, we would have to revise all the things we just put in place in order to change that. It's not impossible.
But it's not impossible.
It's not impossible, but it would cause additional work.
Spencer, then Kathleen.
I did have my hand up first.
You should speak first.
But we know what the funding's going to, we know at the end of the legislative session what the funding's going to be, right? And we know that they're going to send that amount of funding to us July 1, right? So are we not fluid enough here that we can't send that out prior to or right at July 1?
Sir, well, from a technical standpoint, we don't really have the funding until, that's the issue. And then I think we need to be cognizant of the fact, have to really some input or feedback from the LEAs. Just because we were able to send it out maybe 2 weeks earlier than we have in the past, I'm not sure what burden that puts on them. You know, the distribution of that part too.
That's my point. Is it possible? Is it hard or is it possible? See,
This is just.
You know, when I talked to Terrell about this, because Terrell has always been the champion of these funds, and we as the board asked the legislature to give him these funds, and I think if we can make it easier for him, if it's possible, we should do everything we can to make it possible for them to have these funds earlier. So I'm wondering if we can put together it's too late for this year. Maybe we can
put the bus
together,
people in charge of this.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe we could put together a group like that could work on it.
But do we have to do that, really put together a group? Because we, like I said, we know what the check's going to be issued to us on July 1. We could.
Know what districts need, do we?
No. But isn't it done based on Natalie has the answer.
It becomes a district problem if you get a different.
It's local control.
Natalie.
The point that I wanted to bring up is
that
2
gavel
weeks
is really
going to make any
irritating.
difference. I mean, the issue, I think the root cause problem that Board Member Hanson is discussing is when the LEAs make funds available to their teachers. And whether I send them money 2 weeks earlier or not is not going to change a LEA policy.
Right.
So I think that the group that needs to be convened are the LEAs and the methods that they use to distribute the funds, which is not something that we prescribe at the board level currently.
Board member Hanson, does that answer?
We could put in rule that the funds have to be distributed by August 1st. We could do that.
Or refunded to the state.
You know, because I just think if there's something that we can do to make this easier for these teachers, we should do it.
Okay, Spencer.
I think you were first on this.
I
one.
was.
Excuse me, Kathleen.
So I was previously part of the receipt thing, and people were upset that they were losing their receipts. So then they gave us a gift card so that you could use it like a credit card. So I think our districts have worked to try to make it easier, but by making it easier, they actually made it more difficult. The whole process of having you given a gift card, you can't have people just start coming in and saying, I want my money. You have to disseminate it in a reasonable fashion, and not every district does it the same way. So I think that leaving it in local control and having the districts, because the districts do have the fund on July 31st, and they actually could make those funds available, but they don't have the tool to disseminate it because my first day back at work is August 9th. So unless they want to say you can come in August 1st and get your card, but then who are they going to have available to give that card to you? So it's not, it's very different at every district. So I think that the funds are available, it's just the mechanism that the districts are using. And I agree with you, I would love the money sooner, but when we did have that, people complained about that process as well. So it would be hard for us to create a policy to make it easier for our districts because of those variables.
Well, I think it's something that should be discussed, and I would like to see a committee discuss it. I think it should be something that we can put together and have people discuss. Because we dictate other things, right? And like I said, we have a rule, we could put a date in there, and if it was just LEA's money, that's one thing, right? But this is money we are asking the legislature to give to teachers. We, as the board, have asked that money to go to teachers. And we ask every year for an increase in it. Terrell's the one that's really championed this. And I just think that it's not out of line for us to ask for LEAs to come together and see if we can come to some kind of agreement on how that money is distributed and if it can be distributed earlier.
Mark.
Well, I think he's butting in line, but go ahead, Mark.
Mark, I still call him Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's something we can take to our superintendents to say, how can you remedy this? We can also look at ways, maybe it's doable that we take some of our board care, somehow to prepay, right now, we can't afford, there's no way that within 30 days from July 1 to July 31st, the process, how money works, that we're going to get it into the teacher's hands. It's not going to happen unless we do something different and get creative outside the normal.
She said it was possible. Terry said it was possible.
Don't use me in this one.
Terry's only here to give positive feedback. He's not allowed to speak.
What if we ask our staff to look at this and come back to us in the October board meeting?
Every district is different. Every district is different.
Spencer.
So I would like on the table as one of the items to discuss, let's be honest, and this is going to sound really mean, it wasn't us that got the money per student. It was one year when the teachers were beating the crap out of the legislature, and they decided, they came up with this, hey, we should give supply money to the teachers. It'll shut them up. And so they came up with this idea. If we really want to do this the way, and I know this is going to be a little extra work, but if we really wanted to do this the right way and got credit for it, we would determine how much every full-time teacher and how much every part-time teacher was going to get in supply money. And the district would have to provide those names to us, and we would cut those checks and send them out from who? From the state school board, and not from their local LEAs. We'd send them out from the state school board, and for once, teachers would think we did something for them. But up to this point, they don't think that we do.
Spencer.
You just show your teacher credential and get a check?
And you know what?
Irrelevant? What do you mean irrelevant?
I have a lot of
it would be done immediately.
respect and
Okay.
for the teachers. I'm trying to help them out.
Hey. I agree. It ought to be sent out on July 1.
Sarcastic.
I'm not being sarcastic. I'm saying we ought to send them out directly. That's what I'm saying. I believe this. I'm not saying it. My wife, I just said to her last night, she cut down some branches off a tree, and I said, this is as relevant as your 14-year-old thing, Joel, so stop rubbing your eyes. I said, that's amazing. You're amazing. This morning she told me I was being sarcastic. I was not. I said it was amazing. I'm not being sarcastic at all. I think we ought to send that money out with a letter from the state legislature and the state school board and bypass the districts directly and have it go to them.
Say thank you.
And we'd get it out to them early.
But why should teachers have to hold on to their receipts and then hold on to
They
their
shouldn't.
money?
It
That's
should
the
be
whole
a
point.
direct
That's
check.
the whole point. You get the money.
No, you get the money.
You don't have to hold
no
on to it.
receipts,
You
no
don't have to carry the
stupid.
debt.
I bought 15 pencils for my classroom and 5 boxes of tissues and some crayons. Stupid.
And you're not allowed to buy food anymore.
No.
Stupid also.
Yeah, just give them the money.
Just give them the money.
Here. Show me the money. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In October.